Chapter 1529 Further Provocation. Chapter 1529 Further Provocation. There was a clear regulation in the martial arts academy. The residence of a disciple would be a forbidden area that was off limits to all other disciples unless they received an express invitation to enter. Those who broke this rule would be punished. On the less severe end of the spectrum, they might be directly expelled from the academy. On the more severe end, however, they might have their cultivation crippled or even be executed. Thus, the disciples of the academy were all extremely at ease. Their residences would be a safe harbor where they could peacefully cultivate. However, this extremely strict rule was suddenly broken. 3 people barged into Ling Han's residence, their demeanor ferocious and haughty. Ling Han left his room, only to see that there were 2 men and 1 woman. Moreover, he recognized 2 of the 3 intruders. One of the men was Kai Miao, a big shot of the 8th campus. Meanwhile, the woman enjoyed an even higher status. She was Zhu Xiu, the wife of the great saint. The last man was extremely young, and he was a youth in the truest sense of the word. He was only 20 or so years old, yet he had already reached the mountain river tier. This was quite astonishing. One had to realize that Ling Han had also only been at the mountain river tier when he was at the same age as him. "Ling Han!" Zhu Xiu said coldly. She wore a menacing and hateful look as she pointed at Ling Han with her slender finger. She had wanted to bring trouble upon Ling Han back then, and she had purposefully tried to help Gu Daoyi during the competition between the new disciples. However, the great saint had personally spoken and righted the record. That was equivalent to slapping her across the face. Although she had been furious at the time, did she dare to go against the great saint? However, things were different now. Her son was being raised as the successor of the great saint, and she had more so educated him to be extremely obedient toward her. In fact, even the great saint didn't dare to offend her. After all, could he abandon his son? Thus, she was finally able to barge over and seek revenge. This had been over a dozen years in the making, and she had also had to suppress her fury for this entire time. Ling Han smiled as he clasped his hands and said, "Greetings, Saint Mrs." This was standard etiquette, and he couldn't give them more excuses to target him. "You dare to remain standing after seeing the Saint Mrs.?" Kai Miao asked balefully. He had never forgotten Ling Han's crime of breaking the tradition of the academy. Meanwhile, Zhu Xiu stood tall and proud as she crossed her arms before her chest. She naturally had to exhibit her might as the Saint Mrs. Ling Han shook his head and asked, "Which rule of the academy states that I have to kneel before the Saint Mrs.? This isn't a rule of the academy, but it's the most basic etiquette. Do you dare to disrespect a saint?" Kai Miao roared sternly. Of the 4 big shots of the 8th campus, Yususu had always put her full concentration on studying formations. She hoped to become a saint through formations. In fact, Ling Han had never even met her before. Meanwhile, Ren Feiyun was on the side of Ling Han. Although Qi Tian was also a proponent of old traditions, he was far less extreme than Kai Miao. This was especially the case after he learned that Ling Han had even dared to argue with the Saint Mrs. Upon learning of that, he gave up on trying to force Ling Han to lower his head. Of the 4 big shots, only Kai Miao was insistent on dealing with Ling Han. However, Ling Han had always been in either the Black Tower or his own residence. Moreover, with his status, Kai Miao couldn't stand guard outside Ling Han's residence all day long, either. Thus, he had never found an opportunity to deal with him. It was only now that he had finally found a great opportunity. The Saint Mrs. was personally visiting Ling Han to deal with him, and she was even bringing her son along with her. She and Kai Miao had instantly reached an agreement to barge over together. Even if the sky fell, wasn't the Saint Mrs. here to hold it up for him? Ling Han shook his head and said, "My respect for saints lies in my heart. I don't need to act it out for others to see." "Pathetic sophism," Kai Miao said with a cold humph. "Are you going to kneel or not?" It was Ling Han's refusal to crawl through the dog flap that had sparked all of this conflict in the first place. However, even the Saint Mrs. and the son of the great saint were present now. Could Ling Han still persist with his stubbornness? Ling Han simply looked over to the young man. He was none other than the son and only child of the Star Sand Saint. At that time, he had still been a bratty child who cried for everyone to become his horsey. In fact, he had even been frightened by Ling Han. A dozen or so years had passed, and the bratty child of the past had already grown up to become a handsome and energetic young man. He smiled and said, "Young man, you are?" A bashful smile appeared on the youth's face, and he replied, "I'm Mi Xueming. So the Star Sand Saint's surname is Mi." Ling Han involuntarily chuckled upon seeing his reaction. Back then, this Mi Xueming had been a bratty child who had even used a heavenly body-tier cultivator as his horse. Upon seeing the heavenly phoenix divine maiden, he had even insisted on having her become his wife. Yet he was acting all shy and bashful now. It was very likely that the Star Sand Saint had taught him well. Descendants of genuinely powerful clans were indeed proud, but this pride was usually hidden within their mind. From the outside, they would appear especially cordial and easygoing. "Ling Han!" Zhu Xiu and Kai Miao roared in unison. He was acting far too arrogant. He had actually ignored both of them. "Detain him!" Zhu Xiu was finally unable to contain her fury any longer. Ling Han had acted in an identical manner back then, completely ignoring her words. In her eyes, all she wanted was some face. Was it that difficult for him to lower his head toward her? Kai Miao sneered coldly. With the Saint Mrs. present, who would dare to obstruct him? Ren Feiyun wouldn't dare, and the Tranquil Heart Saint would most likely also turn a blind eye. After all, he wouldn't dare to challenge the actions of the Saint Mrs., would he? "Xiao!" A fragrant scent breezed over as Empress Wan Xing and the heavenly phoenix divine maiden appeared beside Ling Han. The Empress peered down at Zhu Xiu. She was an incredibly proud individual, and she couldn't care less about Zhu Xiu being the Saint Mrs. or whatnot. Anyone who dared to disrespect her husband was as good as provoking her might. Moreover, her fury was enough to make wind and clouds lose color. Gasp! Zhu Xiu couldn't help but widen her eyes in astonishment upon seeing the Empress. In fact, even her breathing stopped for a second. How could there be such a beautiful woman in the world? From her appearance to her physique, and also to her demeanor, every single aspect of her being was indescribably perfect. "How audacious!" the Empress roared as she rose 3 meters into the air. She pointed down at Zhu Xiu and the others and said, "You dared to disrespect my husband? Have you people become tired of living?" Zhu Xiu finally regained her senses upon hearing this, and rage instantly spread across her face. This B*TCH actually dared to scold her. Moreover, she had purposefully risen 3 meters into the air. Just how much contempt did she hold for them? She also hovered into the air, rising 3 meters above Empress Wan Xing. "Are you not going to kneel and greet this Saint Mrs.?" Ling Han smiled before pulling the Empress down and into his embrace. "There's no need to argue with this type of person. It's not worthwhile. MHMM. The Empress smiled sweetly as she replied with a gentle nod. "Fuck." Kai Miao's eyes were red with jealousy. Even though he viewed himself as a supreme prodigy, and even though he only had cultivation on his mind, his heart still swayed when he saw the stunningly beautiful Empress. In fact, he could barely control himself. However, such a beautiful and noble celestial maiden was actually acting all sweet and gentle as she rested in Ling Han's embrace. The sight of this was like having knives plunged into his heart. "Humph! You've disrespected the traditions, and you've even dared to talk back to the Saint Mrs. Obediently bow down and accept your crimes." Kai Miao finally lashed out at Ling Han. "You dare?" The Empress' gaze became sharp, and she immediately leaped forward to block Kai Miao's attack. Boom! A devastating aura burst into the surroundings. This was the unique and overwhelming might of her divine fetus. Its effects were similar to Ling Han's heaven's might in that it could prevent others from unleashing their full power. Such was the Empress' power that even the big shots wouldn't dare to underestimate her. Kai Miao didn't want to battle against the Empress, yet she left him with no option but to do so. He immediately altered his attack to grab at her. In any case, this presented a good opportunity for him. If he wanted to conquer this noble and proud woman, the first step would be to shatter her pride. How would he shatter it? With strength, of course. The Empress smiled balefully as a brick appeared in her hands. Chapter 1530 Sudden Arrival of a Sain. Chapter 1530 Sudden Arrival of a Sain. An intense battle broke out between the Empress and Kai Miao, and this battle was quickly taken into the sky. Although there were the formations of saints here, a battle between two eternal river tier elites, especially two whose battle prowess had reached the consummate level, would definitely be able to destroy all of these formations. Of course, if these formations hadn't existed, then everything in the surroundings would have already been obliterated. In fact, this expanse of land would have become part of the sea. Such a tremendous battle naturally attracted the attention of many people. The disciples all walked out from their residences and gazed up at the sky. However, what they saw instantly caused cold sweat to form on their foreheads. Incredible! This battle is far too incredible. Who is this? She's actually able to rival a big shot? Yu Susu? No! Someone recognized the Empress, and they quietly revealed her identity. This information quickly spread among the disciples. She was a newly recruited disciple. The old disciples all became numb with shock upon hearing this. What kind of freaks had the Academy recruited this time? Gu Dao had possessed a divine fetus, and he had more so been regarded as the greatest prodigy of all eternity. In fact, he had even become a disciple of the great saint. After him, there was also Ling Han, a new disciple who was renowned as a troublemaker. He was someone who even dared to talk back to the Saint Mrs. At the same time, Ling Han also possessed astonishing strength. During the competition between new disciples, he had even managed to defeat Gu Dao. Moreover, many old disciples had also experienced defeat at his hands. It was rumored that even elites at the consummate level of the Eternal River tier mightn't be able to suppress him. However, regardless of their achievements, there was an indestructible bottom line in the minds of the old disciples: the big shots couldn't be defeated. Regardless of how freakish the new disciples were, they would have no option but to bow their heads before the four big shots. Now, however, this final bottom line had also been obliterated. Empress Luan Xing was battling against a big shot, and she was only at a very minor disadvantage. How is this possible? It's that brick. That's right. Through my careful observations, I've noticed that her brick possesses an incredibly powerful defensive ability. It's as if it can absorb all attacks. Otherwise, that woman definitely couldn't rival a big shot. Even if that's the case, she still possesses astonishing battle prowess. After all, she's only at a minor disadvantage. She's also breathtakingly beautiful. Heavens! How can there be such a stunningly beautiful person in the world? She's so noble, and she's so proud. In fact, even her angry expression is beautiful and intoxicating. Before this, the Empress had only revealed her appearance during the competition between the new disciples. As such, none of the old disciples had ever witnessed her appearance before. Now that they witnessed it, they were all stunned by her beauty. Moreover, they naturally shifted to supporting her instead of Kai Miao. Of course, this was only in terms of the male students. Contrary to them, the female students were all wild with jealousy. They strongly desired for Kai Miao to ruin her beauty. However, the cultivation world was dominated by men, and the 8th campus was no exception to this phenomenon. There were only 30 or so female disciples in the entire 8th campus. Thus, they naturally couldn't turn the tide of popular opinion. Everyone was shouting in support of the Empress, not considering the fact that Kai Miao might settle matters with them one by one after this. Humph! Zhu Xiu was enraged, and she humphed coldly as she unleashed her might as the Saint Mrs. Silence! Anyone who dares to utter another word will be expelled. To most people, the title of Saint Mrs. was still filled with might and power. Thus, the onlookers quickly shut their mouths. However, they still silently cheered for the Empress in their minds. The Saint Mrs. couldn't forbid them from doing this, could she? Meanwhile, Ling Han waved his hand at Mi Xueming and said, "Come, junior brother me, let's have a chat." This, This was blatant provocation. An expression of wild fury spread across Zhu Xiu's face. You're looking down on me far too much. However, she was truly helpless against Ling Han. After all, there were only so many people who could suppress him. Could it be that she had to seek help from the Tranquil Heart Saint? However, if he had wanted to greet her, he would have done so a long time ago. With the divine sense of a saint, how could he have not detected her arrival? The fact that he hadn't come over to greet her signified that he wanted to avoid her. Since this was the case, would she be able to find him? Zhu Xiu felt extremely stifled. With her lofty status, she was actually unable to deal with a measly disciple of the Academy? 1. A saintly might rippled into the surroundings as the Tranquil Heart Saint unexpectedly appeared before the disciples. Zhu Xiu couldn't help but chuckle coldly and say, "Tranquil Heart, how arrogant of you! I've been here for so long, yet you're only coming here to greet me now." The Tranquil Heart Saint ignored her accusations, frowning slightly as he gazed up at the sky. Ling Han was slightly astonished. The Tranquil Heart Saint wasn't faking his expression. However, what could cause a saint to frown? 1. A thick golden path suddenly descended from the sky, exuding a saintly might as it did so. Another saint had arrived. In the blink of an eye, a figure walked out from among the dazzling golden path. It looked as if he were walking slowly, yet each stride of his could actually cover hundreds of millions of kilometers. Before the disciples knew it, he had already arrived inside the academy. This was a tall and slim middle-aged man. His skin was pale, and there was the symbol of a rock between his brows. "How should I address you, fellow cultivator?" the Tranquil Heart Saint asked. His tone was extremely solemn. Saints were the most powerful beings of the world. Even if this person were only a small saint, he would still possess the ability to kill everyone present if he went wild. Of course, this was apart from the 10 saints. However, the wife and son of the Star Sand Saint were present, so the Tranquil Heart Saint naturally didn't dare to be careless. The middle-aged man glanced at the Tranquil Heart Saint before replying. "I'm Huingmu. Fellow cultivator Hu." The Tranquil Heart Saint clasped his hands in greeting. "I'm Tranquil Heart. Dare I ask why you've suddenly come here?" Huingmu calmly glanced at him again, and said, "Several young members of the Hu clan were killed, and through my deduction, I've concluded that their deaths are related to this place. He was here to seek revenge?" The Tranquil Heart Saint's expression darkened, and he said, "Then you must investigate carefully. After all, a case involving human lives should be treated with utmost care." Huingmu was unfazed by the Tranquil Heart Saint's words. He swept his gaze over every single disciple. Under his gaze, the disciples all felt as if they were naked, with not a single secret able to remain hidden. Only when the Tranquil Heart Saint humphed did he retract his gaze. "I've already discovered an ancient chariot on a nearby planet. That's definitely not a chariot that you people can possess. From my deductions, someone here coincidentally came across the disciples of my Hu clan after they obtained some treasures. They then attacked my disciples and ended up killing them." He paused for a moment before continuing. "My request is simple. Hand over the treasures and the culprit." The Tranquil Heart Saint chuckled coldly. "You're acting far too arrogant. You suddenly arrived here, and now you're asking for this and that? Do you think this is your territory? You're only a small saint, yet there are 10 saints guarding this planet. In fact, there's even a great saint. There's no room for you to act all smug and arrogant. I have no obligation to satisfy your request," the Tranquil Heart Saint said. He resolutely refuted Huingmu's request. Huingmu was just about to get angry, yet he suddenly saw Empress Luanxing and Kai Miao descend from the sky at this moment. In fact, he had only managed to descend here because he had discovered the Empress battle against Kai Miao. After all, they were extremely powerful Eternal Rivertier elites. He had been unfazed before, yet his eyes instantly lit up when he saw Empress Luanxing. The Empress' beauty was definitely enough to capture the hearts of all men. Even saints were no exception to this. Saints were also human, just that they were slightly more powerful. In any case, Huingmu hadn't cultivated so earnestly for some noble and lofty aim. Indeed, every single cultivator yearned to become a Genesis tier saint. However, this wasn't their ultimate goal, and there was naturally a reason behind their desire. Some people simply wanted to become more powerful, while others wanted to obtain a longer lifespan. Meanwhile, there were also those who desired to obtain more power, those who wanted freedom, and those who wanted beautiful women. Huingmu wasn't that interested in women, but the Empress' beauty was enough to capture his interest and shatter his self-control. Moreover, as a saint, he would naturally take whatever he wanted. He didn't need to be afraid of anything or anyone. As such, he reached over and wantonly grabbed at Empress Luanxing. Chapter 1531 Surrounded by Saints. 1531 Surrounded by Saints. How dare you! The Tranquil Heart Saint roared in rage. This person actually dared to kidnap his disciple before his eyes? Did this person think that he was a pushover? He lashed out with his palm, his might as a saint also emanating outward. Even heaven and earth would lose their luster when a saint unleashed their fury. Huingmu humped upon seeing this. He had no choice but to retract his hand and parry the Tranquil Heart Saint's attack. Even though he viewed himself as far superior to the Tranquil Heart Saint, his opponent was still a fellow saint, after all. Thus, how could he dare to face the Tranquil Heart Saint's attack without any defenses? That would be seeking death. Pun! The two of them exchanged a strike, sending bursts of shock waves rippling into the surroundings. Boom! The entire campus was instantly obliterated by these devastating shock waves. At the same time, countless people were thrown into the air as if they were mere hay. Some of them vomited blood, while some others suffered even worse fate. They had their arms or legs brutally torn off. At this moment, it was as if the campus had become a living hell. Fortunately, they still had the saint-level formation to block some of the shock waves. As such, none of the disciples were killed. This was the power of saints. Just a tiny fraction of the shock waves from their exchange was already devastating enough to slaughter countless people. Moreover, this was already in the scenario where there was a saint-level formation to block some of the shock waves. If they continued to exchange blows like this, the disciples of the Academy would definitely suffer huge casualties. Damn it! The Tranquil Heart Saint cursed. His hair was standing on ends, and it was clear that he was beside himself with fury. Under the influence of the Star Sand Saint, the Tranquil Heart Saint, and the other 8 small saints had all developed a hobby of nurturing young talents. They didn't necessarily treat each of their disciples as a son or daughter, but they did indeed pour a lot of their time and effort into raising them. However, the academy that they had developed for so many years was going to be whimsically destroyed just like this. And their disciples were more so going to be wantonly slaughtered. Thus, it was only natural that the Tranquil Heart Saint was incandescent with rage. Do you have the right or ability to stop me? Huingmu sneered. Couldn't they see that he had come from the Forbidden Land? As such, was his battle prowess one that a small saint could rival? He couldn't care less about the lives of these cultivators. He immediately launched another attack, seeking to suppress the Tranquil Heart Saint. You've taken things too far! The Tranquil Heart Saint roared. 1. The godly bones in his body lit up as he activated them. He raised a hand, and a burst of sword light instantly swept outward, illuminating the entire sky. Huingmu faltered for a moment. He then turned around and retreated several steps. He was slightly astonished. I've indeed underestimated you. You've actually managed to transform your own body into a formation. The Tranquil Heart Saint remained silent as he continued to launch attacks at Huingmu. His body was surrounded by sword intent, and it was extremely evident that he was truly enraged. His killing intent was already soaring into the sky. However, this still isn't enough to stop me, Huingmu announced haughtily. 8 stones technique. His muscles started to bulge up, and he quickly transformed into a gigantic rock golem. Each rock that he was composed of was like an indestructible saintly material. That was right, his body would be as tough as saintly material of the same level when he channeled the 8 stones technique. You're nothing but a mere ant! He wore an expression of utter disdain as he charged at the tranquil heart saint. In the eyes of those from the Forbidden Lands, cultivators from the immortal realm were nothing but mere ants. This would be the case even if they were Genesis tier saints. At most, they could only be considered as slightly more powerful ants. This was an innate contempt that they held. The two saints were locked in an intense battle. Meanwhile, the others were all fleeing for their lives. Otherwise, they would definitely be killed if they were accidentally hit by a shock wave from the battle. Wang, 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 wang! Several golden paths streaked over one after another. The Black River Saint, Dawn Cloud Saint, and the remaining 8 small saints had all rushed over. They acted in unison and immediately dissipated the shock waves that were surging into the surroundings. If they didn't do so, the disciples would definitely suffer a casualty rate of over 60%. Moreover, these small saints hadn't come by themselves. In fact, they were all accompanied by some disciples from their own campuses. Of course, these were all the most outstanding disciples. With his worries gone, and with 8 other small saints to guard the surroundings, the Tranquil Heart Saint instantly unleashed his full battle prowess. However, Huangmu truly hadn't been lying. He was indeed more powerful than the Tranquil Heart Saint. This was especially the case now that he was channeling the 8-stone technique. His physique was astonishing, and few at the same cultivation level as him would be able to wound him. Put simply, he was near undefeatable. This was also the reason why he dared to provoke others so wantonly, and the reason that he looked down upon other saints. What? The Tranquil Heart Saint is actually being suppressed by him? It can't be. Although the Tranquil Heart Saint is the 8th out of the Star Sand Saint's 9 disciples, his battle prowess is definitely powerful enough to rank within the top 3. Don't worry! We have 9 saints on our side! The disciples were all engrossed by the spectacular battle. Saints were synonymous with invincibility in their minds, yet a battle between 2 saints would naturally yield a victor and a loser. It was just that they hadn't expected Huangmu to be more powerful. Humph! The Dipankara Saint and Hardship Alchemy Saint leaped forward and joined the battle in unison. If they didn't act now, it would only be a matter of time before the Tranquil Heart Saint was defeated. To say nothing of 3 saints, I'll still suppress you if all 9 of you join, Huangmu said with a sneer. These saints had relied on themselves to discover the saintly Tao. Thus, how could their Tao rival the inheritances from the Forbidden Lands? Huangmu roared as he swung his fists in unison, unleashing a boundless power. His 3 opponents didn't dare to face his attack head-on. In fact, they had no option but to continuously retreat. The Torrential Rain Saint and Iron Saber Saint exchanged a glance before both leaping over to join the battle as well. However, they were still unable to gain the upper hand. Everyone was stunned. They were all saints, so how did their battle prowess differ by so much? This wasn't a small gap in power, but rather a huge gulf in power. The 5 saints had teamed up, yet they were still unable to suppress Huangmu. In fact, Huangmu was the one who was enjoying the advantage. This was unbelievable. Now that it had come to this, the remainder of the 9 saints had no choice but to join the battle. Only then were they able to wrest back some momentum. However, defeating Huangmu was nothing more than a pipe dream. That's enough, a calm voice suddenly said. This voice was like the intent of heaven and earth, and it was not something that the cultivators could resist. Master! The 9 saints naturally pulled away from the battle. A conflicting look appeared on Huangmu's face. In the end, however, he still decided to stop. So there was still another saint! Your strength is above mine, so I wasn't able to detect you at all. Even though he said this, the look of haughtiness on his face wasn't dampened in the slightest. This was because he was a member of the 8 Stones Forbidden Land. Any random Grand Elder from there could easily crush the cultivators of the immortal realm. You can leave now, the Star Sand Saint said calmly. Fine. Hand the culprit over, hand the treasures over, and also hand that woman over. Huangmu pointed at Empress Wanxing as he spoke. Just then, he had only discovered her otherworldly beauty. Now that he looked more carefully, he discovered that even her physique was freakishly powerful. She definitely possessed a divine fetus. If he had children with this woman, they would definitely possess unparalleled talent. You've crossed the line, the Star Sands Saint said coldly. In his eyes, his disciples weren't just his disciples. They were also his face and his reputation. If he failed to protect even his disciples, then what right did he have to be a great saint? In any case, Huangmu was just a small saint. Regardless of how powerful he was, the fact remained that he was a small saint. Friend, Huangmu began. The 9 saints were furious upon hearing this. Huangmu was but a small saint, yet he was actually referring to their esteemed master as friend. Was he trying to speak on the same level as their master? How audacious! However, Huangmu was unfazed by their furious glares, and he continued, You can't begin to imagine just how powerful the place that I come from is. If you disobey me, all of you will die. Humph! The Star Sand Saint was also unable to contain his anger any longer. A large hand instantly descended from the sky and swatted at Huangmu. The Star Sand Saint didn't even need to show himself. The gulf in power between a great saint and a small saint was analogous to the gulf in power between a mountain river cultivator and a mere mortal. It was insurmountable. Boom! To say nothing of blocking this attack, Huangmu didn't even have the ability to flee from this attack. He instantly disappeared under the large hand. However, there was a sudden flash of gray light. Pa! The large hand was surprisingly shattered, revealing Huangmu's unscathed figure. Gasp! Even a great saint couldn't contain him? Chapter 1532 Who can withstand a single strike of mine? 1532 Who can withstand a single strike of mine? Huangmu's body was shrouded in a layer of dazzling light. Looking closely, the cultivators discovered that this was actually a precious robe. There were several glowing divine patterns on this robe, and it was as if heaven and earth were expounding some profoundly mysterious notion. Huangmu hadn't been able to resist the attack of the great saint because of his own abilities, but rather because of this precious robe. In fact, this was much more understandable. If he truly had been that powerful, then wouldn't he have suppressed the Tranquil Heart Saint and the other small saint long ago? Ha ha! Huangmu roared with laughter. You people are nothing but a smattering of ants. Yet you actually attempted to injure me? Where is your confidence coming from? Audacious. How incredibly audacious. In any case, it's not as if you genuinely have the power to resist the attack of a saint. Huangmu peered down at the cultivators and said, What a bunch of trash. You people will still be trash even if you manage to reach the saint tier. This was the sense of superiority that those from the Forbidden Lands possessed. Huangmu held an innate disdain for those of the immortal realm, especially since he had viewed himself as a descendant from the celestial realm since the very beginning. He was convinced that he would one day return to the celestial realm. The Star Sand Saint's voice rang out again. Your precious robe isn't truly woven from saintly material. Rather, it's like a decree in that there's a limit regarding how long it can be used for. So, how long can you withstand my attacks for? I can withstand 100 of your attacks without a problem. Huangmu replied confidently. He retrieved a drum and said, This is a child-parent drum, and once I strike it and channel my divine sense into it, I'll be able to instantly teleport to the location of the parent drum. You're a great saint, and I'm indeed unable to rival you. However, there are 3 saint kings in the 8 stones forbidden land, and any one of them possesses the ability to reign supreme over the entire world. Are you sure you want to provoke the ancestors of my clan? This was a blatant threat. However, this threat was very effective. Saint kings! What kind of concept was this? These were beings who were unrivaled throughout heaven and earth. They were the most powerful beings of the immortal realm. The gulf between saint kings and great saints was like the gulf between great saints and small saint. They would possess a definite and overwhelming advantage. If they truly provoked a saint king, what kind of calamity would they be bringing upon themselves? Heavens! There are genuinely saint kings in this world? Is he bluffing? The 10 saints all shook their heads. With their experience, they could naturally determine the level of the divine patterns on Huingmu's precious robe. It had indeed surpassed the level of great saint. In other words, there was indeed a saint king within the 8 stones forbidden land. Of course, it was still anyone's guess if there was one saint king or 3. The Star Sand Saint remained silent, and his 9 disciples also remained silent. Ha ha! Only Huingmu's wanton and arrogant laugh reverberated throughout the surroundings. What a bunch of weaklings. It's not that I'm looking down on you, but I can withstand the strike of a great saint. However, which of you can withstand a single strike of mine? Is this even comparable? You're wearing a precious robe, and this is the only reason you were able to withstand the attack of the great saint. It wasn't through your own abilities. However, you're using this as a foundation for your arrogance, and you're even looking down on the 10 saints. This is crossing the line. However, who dared to retort him? He had withstood the attack from the Star Sand Saint. However, among those below the level of great saint, who could withstand a single strike of his? Is there anyone? Is there? Huingmu shouted arrogantly. You're nothing but a bunch of weaklings. Am I wrong to say this? You're pushing it. The Star Sand Saint humphed. Huingmu was a small saint, yet he actually dared to display such unbridled arrogance before him. How many years had it been since he had experienced such provocation and disrespect? Huingmu reeled himself in a little, but there was still a cold sneer on his face. My request still remains the same. Hand the culprit over, hand the treasures over, and hand that woman over. Otherwise, you can also select a person from among you. If they can withstand a single strike of mine, I'll retract my previous statements, and even offer an apology. I'll then leave straight away. The 9 saints were infuriated upon hearing this. Huingmu still dared to issue such blatantly unfair challenges. They were already showing incredible restraint by allowing him to go free. If you refuse, I'll invite the ancestor of the Forbidden Land over, Huingmu said menacingly. At that time, all of you will only have the option of death. How incredibly arrogant. The disciples were all outraged. Even if you're a saint, you're still taking things too far. Let me go! Let me go! I'll face his attack. Numerous hot-blooded youths stepped forward and volunteered to accept Huingmu's challenge. In fact, there were many big shots among these volunteers. These were supreme prodigies, and they were cultivators who were birthed and nurtured by heaven and earth. They possessed power that was unimaginable to most people. Moreover, they were only a step away from reaching the saint tier. However, this single step was like the insurmountable gulf between heaven and earth. All of you get back! The tranquil heart saint chided. The disciples all felt extremely aggrieved. The Star Sand Martial Arts Academy was a holy land for the hundreds of nearby galaxies. Whenever one mentioned the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy, it was as if they were talking about a pilgrimage site. This was a holy land that had produced countless powerful elites. Now, however, a single outsider had intruded and trampled all of them under his feet. This was both humiliating and infuriating. In fact, I won't mind if one of you 9 accepts this challenge either, Huingmu said as he looked toward the 9 saints. They were all small saints, so how could the 9 saints fail to block just one of his strikes? The tranquil heart saint stepped forward and said, I'll battle against you. You're not worthy, Huingmu said with a shake of his head. There was disdain in his voice, and he continued, You definitely won't be able to withstand a single strike of mine. Upon seeing the expression of fury on the tranquil heart saint's face, he asked, Did you think I was fighting with my full power just then? What? The tranquil heart saint pondered this question for a moment. In the end, he couldn't help but shake his head. He refused to believe that Huingmu was this powerful. If you can withstand a single strike of mine, I'll immediately turn around and leave. Huingmu lifted a finger and made a tapping motion at the tranquil heart saint. 1. His precious robe lit up, with all of the divine patterns unleashing a brilliant glow. At the same time, a small black dot formed on the tip of his finger. However, this small black dot gave one a feeling of profoundness and boundlessness. Pun! His attack landed, and the tranquil heart saint was instantly sent flying. His face was frighteningly pale, and he was coughing up large mouthfuls of blood. Just how powerful was the tranquil heart saint? Yet he was still unable to withstand the power of a single finger from Huingmu? Everyone was aware of what had happened. It was thanks to the might of his precious robe that Huingmu had been able to defeat the tranquil heart saint with a single strike. However, since this precious robe was being worn by Huingmu, it could also be considered as a part of his abilities. After all, could one request their opponent to remove all of their high-level god tools in battle? Of course not. Is there anyone else? Huingmu's expression was full of arrogance. Sweeping his gaze over the 9 saints one by one, the corners of his lips started to curl up in an even more disdainful smile. Even though the 9 saints were bursting with rage, not a single one of them opened their mouth to accept his challenge. Although the Tranquil Heart Saint was the Star Sand Saint's 8th disciple, he ranked in the top 3 when it came to battle prowess. However, even he had failed to withstand a single strike of Huingmu. Thus, the other saints would certainly suffer an identical fate if they stepped forward. That being the case, they would merely be seeking humiliation if they accepted Huingmu's challenge. However, looking at his arrogant expression, how could they not shake with absolute fury? Is there no one else? What a bunch of weaklings! Huingmu shook his head, and continued. Remember to inscribe the word weakling in your minds in the future. That's how tiny and insignificant you people are. Now, hurry up and hand me what I want. He was incredibly conceited. He had come from a forbidden land, after all, so it was as if he were a heavenly emperor coming out to survey the world. Those of the immortal realm were only worthy to kneel down in his presence. I'll accept your challenge. At this moment, a calm voice suddenly shattered the silence. At the same time, a young man stepped forward from the crowd of disciples. Shua! Everyone immediately turned around to look at the source of the voice. Ling Han! No one could have ever imagined this. Even the 9 saints were unable to withstand Huingmu's might, yet Ling Han was actually stepping forward to accept his challenge. Senior Brother Ling! The new disciples couldn't help but shout. They were all incredibly moved. They naturally didn't believe that Ling Han was more powerful than the 9 saints. However, Ling Han had still stepped forward even after seeing one of the 9 saints being defeated with a single strike. What kind of courage did this take? The senior disciples were also moved upon seeing this. They had all heard about Ling Han's audacity in daring to retort the Saint Missus before. He was truly a courageous individual. However, his opponent this time was a saint. Moreover, this was an unfathomably powerful saint. Ling Han was gambling with his life. Some of the disciples felt that Ling Han was incredibly foolish. They felt that he shouldn't have acted so recklessly. However, they still admired his courage. Perhaps he was seeking death by accepting Huingmu's challenge. However, he was also raising the morale of the entire martial arts academy. There were things that couldn't be abandoned, and there were also times when they couldn't keel over and submit. Chapter 1533I. LL Go! 1533I. LL Go! After stabilizing himself, the Tranquil Heart Saint glared at Ling Han, and said, Cut the nonsense out! Get back! What an absolute joke! He hadn't died yet, so did he need his disciple to step forward to block his enemy for him? However, Ling Han smiled, and said, He's nothing more than a no-name from some small unknown place. What does it matter if I face a single strike of his? No-name? The disciples were all worked into a fervor upon hearing his words. Aren't you extremely arrogant? Well, we're even more arrogant. Good on you, Senior Brother Ling! Senior Brother Ling, I love you! The new disciples all shouted in excitement. They were young, and thus they were all hot-blooded and easily worked up. However, many of the senior disciples were also influenced by this atmosphere, and they also joined into the chorus of shouting disciples. Even if they were killed by Huingmu one by one, they still couldn't back down and weakly submit. They could lose, but they couldn't abandon their dignity. A cold look appeared in Huingmu's eyes. These mere ants actually dared to belittle him? he waved his hand and said, "Come, I'll make sure to smash you into pieces with a single strike. In fact, I'll keep all of the broken pieces the same size as well." Ling Han waved his hand right back, saying, "Enough with the boasting. In any case, you're about to be slapped in the face." "Ha ha!" Huingmu roared with laughter. This young man was truly arrogant. Tsk, he was only 100 or so, yet he had already reached the peak stage of the low extreme of the eternal river tier. His talent was truly quite astonishing. In fact, this talent was already on par with the supreme prodigies of the Forbidden Lands, perhaps even superior. Killing a prodigy like this would probably give him a great sense of achievement. "Guy whose child doesn't have an asshole, hurry up and attack me. Grandpa Dog will concede that you're powerful if you manage to push me back a single step." A loud bark suddenly sounded from among the disciples. It went without saying that this was the voice of the large black dog. After all, how could he not participate in such an exciting confrontation? Huingmu's expression instantly changed. He had been fully focused on cultivation for the entire first half of his life. As such, he had never considered the problem of having children and descendants. Rather, he planned to marry hundreds of women after advancing to the saint tier. However, having children as a saint was extremely difficult. Right now, this grandpa dog or whatever was actually cursing him to have children without assholes? This struck him right where it hurt. "Who's barking?" He wore a baleful expression as he swept his eyes over the disciples. "It's your grandpa dog. If you can, come and bite me." The large black dog's voice was adrift, and it sounded like it was coming from different locations whenever he spoke. Even the saints were unable to pinpoint his location. His skills were extremely mysterious. Huingmu unleashed his divine sense, which surged outward like billowing waves. He was going to uncover the large black dog. "Oh, are you going to fight or not?" Ling Han asked impatiently. "You're a saint, after all, so why are you being so whiny and hesitant?" Everyone laughed upon hearing this. Huingmu was being relentlessly teased by Ling Han and the large black dog, and this dragged the disciples out from the frustration and hopelessness they had felt after the defeat suffered by the 9 saints. Huingmu trained his gaze on Ling Han. Although he felt a strong desire to kill the large black dog, he was aware that he wouldn't be able to find him anytime soon. Thus, it wouldn't hurt to kill Ling Han first. This was also a supreme prodigy, and thus killing him would definitely give him a strong sense of achievement. Moreover, this person had even dared to ridicule him. Did he not deserve to die? "Hold it right there!" the tranquil heart saint roared as he stepped forward. He couldn't allow his disciple to battle for him. "Shio!" Another golden path appeared as the Star Sand Saint descended upon the scene. He couldn't maintain his composure any longer. He gave Ling Han a stare before waving his sleeves and saying, "Stand back." Although Ling Han's talent was inferior to Gu Daoi's, his battle prowess among those at the same cultivation level was stronger. Thus, the Star Sand Saint also had strong hopes for him. This being the case, he couldn't bear to watch him die. The Star Sand Saint turned around to face Huingmu. "You can piss off now," he chided. However, Huingmu was unfazed by this, and he said, "I'll naturally leave if you give me what I want. Otherwise, I can also leave if one of you is able to withstand a single strike of mine. Not only will I leave, but I'll even offer an apology. I'll admit that I underestimated you ants and weaklings." He was still as arrogant as always, even in the presence of a great saint. The Star Sand Saint wore a dark expression, and there was killing intent emanating from his body. He felt a strong desire to kill this person, even if it meant provoking the Saint Kings of the Forbidden Lands. "Let me face him," Ling Han said as he stepped forward again. "He's but a mere pawn, so there's no need for you to personally deal with him. Believe me." There was a look of strong conviction on Ling Han's face. An Eternal River Tier elite had actually uttered the words, "Believe me," before a great saint. What kind of confidence and boldness was this? The Star Sand Saint was involuntarily stirred by Ling Han's demeanor. At the same time, a rare feeling of doubt arose in his mind. Had he misjudged Ling Han? Talent was indeed very important. However, had Du Daoi possessed the type of confidence and domineering demeanor that Ling Han was displaying right now? This domineering nature, this confidence, this demeanor. Even the great saint was moved by Ling Han's spectacular display. This young man is incredible. He's definitely going to become a supreme elite. The Star Sand Saint silently made a decision in his mind. He was definitely going to protect Ling Han no matter what, even if this meant killing Huingmu and provoking the Saint Kings of the Forbidden Lands. If worse came to worst, he would simply relocate the entire martial arts academy. With the ginormous size of the immortal realm, could they not find somewhere safe to relocate? Ling Han took a few steps forward until he was standing face to face with Huingmu. Only one strike? He asked. Huingmu was in no hurry either, and he calmly replied. Only one strike. Ling Han smiled and said, How about 3 strikes? I'm afraid that you'll renege on your promise in anger and embarrassment if you fail to defeat me in a single strike. Pooh! Many of the disciples spluttered in shock upon hearing this. That was a saint he was speaking to. When a saint came up against an eternal Riveter elite, unleashing 1 strike or unleashing 10,000 strikes wouldn't make an iota of difference. After all, the latter would be killed in a single strike. He was ridiculing him. Ling Han was definitely ridiculing Huingmu. Brilliant! Absolutely brilliant! That Huingmu is far too arrogant. It's only right that he also gets a taste of his own medicine. The large black dog couldn't help but stroke his chin as he stood upright on his hind legs. This brat is learning more and more of my demeanor. Could he be a child that I accidentally fathered in the past? Fortunately, Ling Han wasn't there to hear his musings. Otherwise, he would definitely chase after the large black dog and beat him to death. Huingmu's eyes bulged in anger upon hearing this. There were flames of rage burning within them. The tongue of this person was far too toxic. He definitely couldn't allow him to speak anymore. Otherwise, he would die of rage even if he was a saint. Die, measly ant! He immediately launched an attack, swatting his palm at Ling Han. He didn't activate any secret technique, and he more so didn't unleash the might of his precious robe. This was a simple and unremarkable strike. However, this was still the attack of a saint, after all, and thus it was powerful enough to crush heaven and earth, even being as casual as it was. Who under the level of saint could block this attack? Boom! His attack landed. The Star Sand Saint, Tranquil Heart Saint, and other saints were already prepared to intervene at any moment. They naturally wouldn't stand by idly and watch one of their disciples be ruthlessly killed. However, just as they were about to intervene, they all paused and exclaimed in surprise. Their expressions were indescribably strange. The disciples had all thought that the 10 saints would intervene before Huingmu's attack landed. However, Huingmu's palm had already pressed down, yet the saints were still standing there unmoving. It was as if they were stone statues. Why are they not intervening? Why are they watching Ling Han get killed just like this? How can this be? The attack of a saint was naturally devastating. The surroundings were flooded with plumes of dust and earth, though they were rapidly dissipating and settling down. Pooh! The disciples all spluttered in unison when they saw a figure walking out from amid the plumes of dust and earth. Their jaws dropped open, and their eyes bulged out. It was as if they had been turned into stone. That was Ling Han, perfectly fine and unscathed. An eternal Riveter elite, one at the low extreme, no less, had actually withstood an attack from a saint, even though this was only a casual attack. This was definitely the most absurd thing in the world. This was completely unfathomable. There was definitely something wrong with the heavens. Holy fucking God. Chapter 1534. Hold it right there. 1534. Hold it right there. Who could have imagined that Ling Han would be able to withstand the attack of a saint? This was completely unfathomable. In fact, the disciples were unable to digest this even though they had witnessed it with their very own eyes. Huingmu also widened his eyes in shock. He was unable to believe what he saw. What the fuck? Holy motherfucker. Have I been cursed or something? causing the power of my attack to drop considerably? Otherwise, how could an eternal river tier elite have blocked my attack? This doesn't make sense. This doesn't make any sense at all. There was a period of deathly silence before a chorus of deafening cheers suddenly erupted. This was incredibly uplifting. Although they had felt refreshed when hearing Ling Han and the large black dog ridicule Huang Mu just then, they had all been aware that doing so was merely a cheap shot of no significance. In the end, what was truly important was still strength. Thus, they had all yearned for there to be a hero, one who could make Huang Mu swallow his own words and one who could show Huang Mu the might and glory of the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy. However, they had also known that this was merely a daydream. Even the 9 saints couldn't withstand a single strike of his, so who else would possess the power to battle against him? After all, they couldn't rely on the Star Sand Saint to step forward, could they? Even if he won, what would it actually prove? It was only natural that a great saint would possess a crushing advantage over a small saint. However, just as they were about to fall into despair, a true hero had suddenly stepped forward. Moreover, he had truly managed to block Huang Mu's strike. In fact, he had walked away from it unscathed. "Senior Brother Ling! Senior Brother Ling! Senior Brother Ling!" The cheers were deafening, and even the senior disciples started to call Ling Han their senior brother. Fuck, he was someone who could withstand a strike from a saint. As such, would they feel any embarrassment in calling him senior brother? If they didn't call him senior brother now, they might not even be able to make friends or claim ties with him in the future. It was almost a given that Ling Han would become a saint in the future. In any case, who would believe it if someone claimed otherwise? Long Xiangyue's eyes lit up, and there was a look of adoration on her face. This man had once asked for her dragon horn. That was an expression of love. Meanwhile, Second in the World clicked his tongue in wonder, as he quietly mumbled the word freak. His physique was also extremely sturdy, yet Ling Han was already on a whole other level. Zi Chenfeng, Hong Ma, and the others also shook their heads and sighed in wonderment. The gulf between them and Ling Han had seemingly grown to an insurmountable level already. Of everyone present, only Ling Han, Empress Wan Xing, and a few others knew that Ling Han hadn't blocked Huang Mu's attack with his own strength, but rather had relied on the might of the indestructible Heaven's Scroll to withstand the attack of the saint. In fact, he had already possessed the ability to withstand one full-power strike of a saint when he was at the heavenly body tier. Now that his cultivation had risen explosively, it was only natural that he could withstand a few more strikes. It was because of this that he had challenged Huang Mu to a battle of 3 strikes. Of course, this was a very conservative number. He could definitely withstand 3 strikes. Apologize! Fuck off! The disciples suddenly started to heckle Huang Mu, their expressions fervent and their shouts bordering on wild. This is far too fucking uplifting. This is far too fucking soothing. What saint? Piece of absolute dog *T. Fuck off. The jeers were like roaring waves, and they were like collapsing mountains. After all, there were also many big shots among the disciples. These were prodigies who had reached the consummate level of the eternal river tier. With several thousand disciples present, their combined voice and presence were naturally vast and mighty. There was a dark expression on Huang Mu's face. This result had far exceeded his expectations, and it was more so a huge slap to his face. However, apologizing to these people? Was this possible? He was an elite from the Forbidden Lands, so how could he raise his head in the future if the others learned that he had apologized to ants in the past? There are 2 more strikes, he said. Everyone's jaw dropped upon hearing this. They couldn't believe what they were hearing. Are you really a fucking saint? Can you be any more fucking shameless? You're legitimately going to attack 3 times? What kind of fucking saint are you? Utter trash! The disciples all booed and jeered. In fact, they could barely contain their urge to stick their middle fingers in Huang Mu's face. Huang Mu acted as if he couldn't hear them. Compared to the scorn from these ants, he more so didn't want to apologize to them in public. In any case, it was Ling Han who had asked for him to launch 3 strikes anyway. Without waiting for Ling Han's agreement, he directly raised his palm. He was serious this time, and there was divine light flickering in his eyes. At the same time, a silver river materialized behind his back. This silver river was filled with dazzling stars, so many that they were uncountable at a glance. Upon seeing this, Ling Han also unleashed his own silver river. He was purposefully doing this to compare their silver rivers. 99 heavenly bodies. The stark contrast between the might of their silver rivers was truly astounding. Moreover, since they had unleashed their silver rivers, it would be impossible for them to hide their cultivation level. Boom! Huangmu lashed out again, his heavenly bodies radiating with brilliance as his palms struck down. An overwhelming pressure crushed the surroundings. Ling Han didn't have the time to even dodge this strike. Saints were far too quick in their attack. In fact, this attack had been so quick that even his divine sense hadn't been able to follow it. Pun! The devastating palm strike once again sent plumes of dust and earth into the air. The disciples all had their hearts in their mouths. Although Ling Han had blocked the strike just then, Huangmu definitely hadn't been attacking with his full strength. The dust cleared, revealing a figure who was still standing upright and proud. Ling Han! Senior brother Ling! Ling Han! The disciples faltered for a moment before roaring in fervent excitement again. Their voices were 100 times louder and more fervent than before. They were far too excited. If Huangmu could have still peddled the excuse of not having tried just then the result of this strike had truly rendered this excuse void. He had already gathered power for half a day to launch his attack, so could he still be shameless enough to whine and make excuses? There was a bright glimmer in the eyes of the Star Sand Saint and his 9 disciples. They could say with 100% certainty that Ling Han had genuinely withstood both of these attacks with his own abilities. He hadn't relied on some precious armor or precious robe. This young man was incredible. Meanwhile, Huangmu wore a look of shock and disbelief. Why? Why hasn't he died yet? He's only at the Eternal River tier, so why is he so difficult to kill? Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "There's still one more strike left. Are you going to use it or not? If not, then retract your statements, apologize, and then piss off." Huangmu was boiling with rage, and he truly wanted to kill Ling Han. He refused to believe that an Eternal River tier elite truly possessed the ability to withstand his attacks. Ling Han had definitely practiced some mysterious technique that would allow him to possess a power that rivaled him for a short period of time. What kind of cultivation technique is this? It's far too impressive. He nodded in his mind. He definitely had to obtain this cultivation technique. Even in the celestial realm, such a cultivation technique would still most likely be considered a paramount secret technique. Perhaps it was something that only celestial kings could practice. I'll return and request an ancestor to come and suppress this great saint. I'll then capture Ling Han and force the cultivation technique from him. I admit defeat, he said. He then turned around to leave. Where's the apology? The students shouted. They were extremely unhappy with his attitude. Hadn't he been all arrogant and haughty just then? Why was he cowering now? Huangmu flicked his sleeves in annoyance. What, were these people going to threaten him or something? Humph! A saintly might radiated from the Star Sand Saint's body, and he said, "The most important quality of cultivators is trust and honor. If you go back on your promise, I'll make sure to kill you on the spot." Huangmu's expression involuntarily changed. He could indeed rival the power of this great saint for a short period of time. However, he could only withstand 100 or so of his attacks. This was the limit of the divine patterns on his precious robe. After that, he would revert to being a small saint who was only slightly more powerful than ordinary small saints. Thus, what right did he have to argue with a great saint? Moreover, upon seeing the look of resoluteness on the Star Sand Saint's face, he was certain that this great saint wasn't joking around with him. Wise men didn't fight against the odds. Huangmu hesitated for a moment before saying, "I retract my previous statements and apologize." The disciples instantly whooped in joy upon hearing this. Just how arrogant had Huangmu been just then? Yet, he was being forced to obediently apologize now. This was the might of the Star Sand Saint. This was the might of Ling Han. Huangmu turned around in bitter resentment, and was just about to leave. "Hold it right there!" Ling Han said as he dashed before Huangmu. There was raging, killing intent in his eyes, and he said, "You were apologizing for your ignorance just then. Now, however, I want to settle another score with you. You actually dared to target my wife. Toward people like you, I have a habit of killing them without mercy." Pooh! Everyone was transfixed with shock upon hearing this. Many people couldn't help but splutter in astonishment. What? Am I hearing things? Is there something wrong with my ears? Chapter 1535 I want to kill the Sain. Chapter 1535 I want to kill the Sain. Ling Han actually said he wanted to kill Huangmu? This? He had to be joking. True, Ling Han was indeed very strong, and had even reached a nature-defying extent. He had taken 2 attacks from a saint forcefully, but even so, not one person believed that Ling Han truly was qualified to stand against a saint. That was completely unreal. Otherwise, why had you come to the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy? Who would be worthy of teaching you? When Ling Han had entered the 8th campus, if it hadn't been for Rin Feiyan stepping out to save him, he would probably have been forced to crawl through the dog's hole. How could he possibly have the abilities to match a saint? Everyone shook their heads, and thought that Ling Han had lost his own measure in his pride. "Senior Brother Ling, forget it. Since this stray dog has already admitted defeat, we will just be generous, and spare him just this once." "That's right, Senior Brother Ling, there is no need to drop down to his level. In any case, whatever he says is nonsense." All the students advised, and deliberately disparaged Huangmu so Ling Han would cool his temper. Yet Huangmu had exploded in fury. He was really like a tiger that had gone down to level land. Even these damn little bugs dared to ridicule him? These idiots had completely no idea that he had already sent out news, and in a short few days, the ancestor from his clan would reach this place. By that time, wouldn't that so-called great saint only be suppressed? He turned around menacingly. "Brat, you really want to fight me?" He did not mind taking Ling Han down first. In that way, the secret technique of the Celestial King would definitely belong to him alone. He was sure that Ling Han had definitely cultivated a Celestial King technique. Otherwise, he could not possibly have such frightening defenses. In the face of such a secret technique, so what if he was one of his own clansmen? Even if he had his own descendants in future, it could not be passed down as easily as that. This was too precious. "Old man, you are too shameless!" "That's right, a respected saint would actually challenge an eternal river tear. Why don't you just die?" Everyone laughed mockingly. They did not want Ling Han to accept the challenge at all. "Ling Han, enough," the Star Sand Saint said as well. At present, he was filled with a strong desire to preserve talent. No matter what sacrifices had to be made, he was determined to protect Ling Han. As long as this boy managed to become a saint, he would possess the strength that could allow him to conquer the whole world. Ling Han did not say anything, and instead began to channel that drop of blood essence from the Saint King. Huangmu actually dared to have ideas about the Empress. He could not tolerate that. If the Star Sand Saint had killed Huangmu, he naturally would not have stepped out aggressively, but it was apparent that the Star Sand Saint was wary. Then, he'd just do it himself. Boom! Saintly might filled Ling Han's body. This was a drop of blood essence from a Saint King deliberately left behind by the Heavenly River King. It had lasted through eons, and could allow Ling Han to explode once. He could even become a match for a great saint. It would be enough to kill a small saint. What? Everyone was stunned. This was saintly might. It could not be more obvious. Golden light entwined around Ling Han's body, becoming multiple seals of great Tao. It was sacred, highest, as if the heavenly Tao itself had arrived. This was the saintly might of a Saint King taking form. Pa 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 pa. All the common people knelt, and even those rank 3 king tiers like the second in the world and Zi Chenfeng were not exempted, either. There was nothing that could be done. This was the might of a Saint King that stood above all. Those that could still remain standing were only those saints. Besides them, there was also the Empress, the heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, and the large black dog. You have obtained the blood essence of a Saint King, and it is a complete drop too. Huangmu paled in shock. This was the first time that he could feel how true the threat this man posed to him was. Ling Han's eyes were menacing. He did not say anything. This was merely a man that was about to die. You want to kill me, in your dreams? Huangmu could only answer his own question. Our 8 stones forbidden land is strongest in prediction. Even if you flee to the corners of the world, your only fate will still be death. This was an indirect admission of his fear. Don't even think of killing me, otherwise you will not be able to escape, either. This was what he was saying between the lines. A thought flashed in Ling Han's mind. At the time, Hukan and his group had actually managed to so coincidentally find them out because they had obtained guidance from the ancestor of their clan who had gained the information through prediction. But this ability of prediction obviously was still very inadequate. Otherwise, Hukan and his group would not have died. This kind of ability could not be underestimated, but it was also definitely not omnipotent either. Ling Han, think before you act. The Star Sand Saint did not advise him further, and merely reminded him. The present Ling Han was too strong, he could even equal him in power. Ling Han nodded and said, I have considered carefully. I am determined to stomp this damn bug to death. Fuck! Huangmu cursed internally, but did not dare to say a word. Instead, he turned around and fled. The man had channeled a drop of blood essence from a Saint King, and his present abilities were enough to equal a great saint. How was he supposed to fight that? The precious robe he was wearing could only endure over 100 attacks, and would crumble after this limit was reached. Want to flee? Ling Han smirked. Since he had even used the blood essence of a Saint King, how could he easily allow him to flee? He moved, and his hand was large enough to shadow the skies, grabbing out towards Huangmu. At this moment, Ling Han himself was a great saint. When a great saint moved, a small saint could not possibly dodge, and could only take the attack up front. It was just like how Ling Han could not possibly dodge Huangmu's attack previously. Boom, the precious robe glowed, and divine patterns shone brilliantly. This meant it had exploded with great might, and forcibly blocked Ling Han's attack. Ling Han naturally did not take it to heart. Though there was a time limit to the blood essence of a Saint King, it was definitely enough time for him to send out not just 100 attacks. In other words, Huangmu was dead. To dare make a move to snatch his wife, who would be dying if not him? Boom! 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 Ling Han thrashed Huangmu so madly that he could only be beaten. Everyone was watching open-mouthed with shock, and recalled something that they had overlooked. In truth, Ling Han had no need to have the agreement of a single move with the other party, and could completely make a direct move to cripple him. Why had Ling Han taken such an indirect course, then? That was because Ling Han wanted Huangmu to lower his head and apologize. Otherwise, for someone as proud as Huangmu, even if he was killed by Ling Han, how could he possibly open his mouth and admit his fault? This was working off his anger. First making you apologize and then killing you. Senior Brother Ling is formidable. Senior Brother Ling is imperious. Senior Brother Ling, I want to have your babies. Everyone's cries resounded together. A great many female disciples had forgotten to be reserved, and even Long Xiangyue very much wanted to shout as well. Ling Han moved continuously. With the support of the blood essence of a Saint King, his power had reached an unimaginable level. His grasp of technique had not improved, but when power had reached a certain extent, that would naturally form suppression. Moreover, the blood essence of the Saint King also possessed the regulations on the level of Saint King, though Ling Han could not understand or freely control it. He could only blast it out in one attack after another. This could not be used for comprehension, but could be used in battle. Huangmu's condition began to worsen. His precious robes were seriously consumed underneath the endless attacks. One after another, seals darkened and cracks began to appear. He gritted his teeth. Since his opponent had even used the blood essence of a Saint King, he was obviously determined to kill him, so there was no point to even beg for mercy, and he, too, could not possibly beg for mercy from an ant. He still had that much amount of a backbone in him. He was not resigned to this. He was an honorable saint. Furthermore, he was one who had walked out from the Forbidden Land. Yet he would actually be killed by a junior in the Eternal River Tyr. Even if he was dead, this would mean eternal humiliation, and his name would be infamous in history. He tried his best to break out of the siege. Chapter 1536 He really killed him. Chapter 1536 He really killed him. Too bad. No matter how strong a small saint was, in front of a great saint, he was still just a small saint. Huingmu had not been gifted the blood essence of a Saint King. For a Saint King, this was also a massive loss, and would damage his life force. But he himself was a saint, and also had a precious robe that could dispel the attacks of even a great saint. In his eyes, it was enough to allow him to do as he liked in the immortal realm. However, he encountered a rash fool, who clearly knew how shocking his background was, yet was still determined to hold on to him. There was no need for this, right? Huingmu used all his effort to break through the siege, but in front of the present Linghan, this was a completely impossible feat. The moment he rushed out, he would be smacked back by a massive hand that shadowed the skies. All his effort only ended up in him being dizzy. All the students watched with their hair on ends. This was planning to kill a saint. A saint was noble and highly revered. Even an elite like the Star Sands saint did not dare to easily suppress the other small saints, because there was not much difference in the speed of saints. If one party was clearly trying to flee, the other party could only chase futilely from behind. The present situation was different. Hu asked Huingmu to barge in on his own accord. This was equivalent to delivering himself up on a silver platter. If he still managed to flee like that, what justice would be left in this world? Didn't that mean that the Star Sands saint could only watch on helplessly as any small saint came here and ran berserk? What a joke. Thus, at least in these 100 million years, it had never been heard that a saint had been killed. There were those that died of old age, but there was not one that had died in battle. But now, this exciting scene was about to play out. Killing a saint, and the one who would be killing a saint was an Eternal River Tyr. Heavens! Huingmu had gone crazy. He did not hold back from burning his own life force. Otherwise, he would definitely be dead. By this time, even if he did not want to, he had to put his life on the line. But so what if a small saint burned his own life force? He was still incapable of matching the battle prowess of a great saint. Ah! He cried out, having an arm forcefully ripped off. Ugh! He groaned as a large hole appeared in his chest. Hiss! He frowned as his back suffered a palm strike. Even his heart had been crushed. Even so, he could still fight. The vitality of a saint was sturdy. In fact, there was not much effect on his battle prowess. When one had reached the height he had reached, what was important was using the regulations of heaven and earth. As long as his spirit was not destroyed, it could be claimed that his battle prowess would be maintained at prime condition. However, a spirit was established on a physical body. Without a physical shell, a spirit would only be a weed that had lost its roots. Thus, as long as Huingmu's physical body was destroyed, his spirit would be exposed. By then, it would be too easy to kill him. But right at this moment, Ling Han's aura suddenly declined. Huingmu was first stunned, then became overjoyed. The blood essence of a Saint King in Ling Han was about to be fully consumed. He only had to last for a while longer, and would be able to survive this crisis. Ha ha! He laughed madly. A mere Eternal River Tyr, and you still want to kill a saint? That would only happen in your dreams. This was what a saint was. Even if Ling Han possessed a drop of blood essence of a Saint King, he would not be able to kill a saint either. It was too difficult. Is that so? Ling Han smirked coldly, and drew the divine demon's sword. Pooh! He stabbed it into Huingmu's body. The basis of your confidence is only a drop of Saint King blood essence. Once the saintly blood is consumed, You are nothing in front of me. Huangmu scoffed. An ant will always be an ant. Even if you wear an imperial robe, you will still be a piece of trash. UPU. He suddenly paled in shock. A frightening murderous aura was bubbling inside his body, and instantly destroyed his life force completely. Why was it like this? He hurriedly had his spirit leave his body. Even if he had to discard this body, he would not hold back. At least he could secure his life. As long as his spirit was still present, he could still make a comeback. However, it was too late. The divine demon sword had been forged from divine metal, and having this kind of powerful weapon stab into his body, especially into a vital point, would definitely mean death. Huangmu's spirit had indeed left his body, but the murderous aura had already infected his spirit. It was endlessly eroding his spirit as if it was being weathered away. In an instant, it degenerated. No! A sharp howl rang out from his spirit, and echoed in everyone's mind. This was only a short instant. Huangmu's spirit had disappeared, and he was completely dead. A saint had thus vanished. Quang! A sudden clap of thunder sounded in the skies, and a shower of blood rained down. A saint had died, and gave rise to a lament from the heavens. From a certain aspect, a saint represented the heaven and earth. When a saint died, the heaven and earth would grieve. Everyone was dumbfounded. He had really killed a saint. Something that definitely was impossible to happen had really, truly happened. Heavens! This definitely was the largest miracle in history. An eternal river-tear had killed a saint, and he wasn't even in the pinnacle level of the eternal river-tear. That was a level that theoretically couldn't manage to kill a saint. After persisting for 30 minutes, the rain of blood finally stopped. The dark clouds dispersed, and the thunder stopped. Everything returned to normal. Ling Han turned around and walked back. The divine light on his body had already weakened greatly, but the eyes everyone looked at him with were still filled with reverence. Follow me. The Star Sand Saint curled out a hand, and brought Ling Han back to the ancient academy. He did not even call the 9 small saints with him. Zhu Xiu was surprised, fearful, and filled with hatred simultaneously. This naturally scared her to death, but the Star Sand Saint had completely ignored her bitter experience, which made her extremely furious. I am your wife here, your son's mother. Ling Han and the Star Sand Saint conversed secretly for close to a day, and only then did he return. He immediately called his 2 wives over, and made his preparations to leave the Woodfigure planet. On this day, he asked the Star Sand Saint a great many questions, especially concerning the field of prediction. He found out that when one had entered Saint King level, elites truly would possess that kind of ability. However, it was very vague, and only those Saint Kings that were focused on studying this area could become highly accurate. Unfortunately, that ancestor from the 8 Stones Forbidden Land should be that kind of Saint King. Huangmu had died, and in a few days this ancestor would charge over here. Thus, Ling Han had to leave, and the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy would also put up an act and order the arrest of Ling Han. It was not just the Myriad Directions galaxy that he could not stay. He could not even go to the surrounding galaxies. The prediction of a Saint King was not omnipotent. The nearer he was, the more accurate the prediction would be, and the farther he was, the more vague it would be. He had to immediately leave. Saints could travel through tearing a rip into space, and were even faster than the cloud-piercing shuttle. If he didn't leave now, it would be too late. Ling Han asked the opinions of the Rain Emperor and the others. They all expressed the wish to remain. There were many king tiers here, and competing with them could allow them to advance their cultivation level at a faster pace. Ling Han left behind a large number of leaves from the reincarnation tree, as well as a great many top-grade god tools and saintly material which he allowed the Rain Emperor and the others to freely choose from. He did all that he could. Everyone possessed top-grade cultivation techniques and top-grade materials, and were also nurtured by the resources from the academy. If they still did manage to reach the apex with all this, there was nothing else Ling Han could say. After doing all this, Ling Han, the Empress, and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden set out. There was not a minute to lose. On the 4th day after Ling Han left, a golden path suddenly descended from the skies and landed on the wood-figure planet. Then, a frightening saintly might surged out, causing everyone to feel a tremor radiate from the depths of their hearts. "Are you still not coming out to see me?" a voice rang out. An elder appeared, his saintly might rolling out as if he was the master of this heaven and earth. Chapter 1537 The Hunt Begins. Chapter 1537 The Hunt Begins. The Star Sand Saint appeared at the first moment, and the instant he saw the visitor, he looked shocked. This was a supreme elite, the air of primal chaos entwined all over his body. Even he could not clearly distinguish his features, and could only judge by his voice that this man should be very, very old. And beside this man, there was another young man, who similarly was a saint. However, he was too young. At most, he couldn't be more than 100,000 years old. In fact, it was possible that he was only 10,000 to 20,000 years old. The Star Sand Saint was incredibly surprised. A saint who was only 10,000 to 20,000 years old? Even if he was a prodigy, these 10,000 to 20,000 years would only be enough for him to attain the sun-moon tier, right? But the person in front of him was a saint. Though he was only supposed to be a sun-moon tier, he had already reached the most crucial step into the saint tier. "Greetings, Senior!" The Star Sand Saint bowed towards that supreme elite. This indeed was a Saint King, an existence that even he could only look up to. This elite was an ancestor of the Hu clan, a truly mighty figure, and a being that was on the level of the master of the whole immortal realm. His name was Hu Luo, and had reached out 30 billion years ago. Though he had lived for so many years, he could still live on for another 10 billion years or so, and could see who knew how many elites being replaced by newer generations. Saint King Hu Luo glanced at the Star Sand Saint. His expression could not be seen, but a person that had come out from a forbidden land had to be incredibly prideful. What more when he was a Saint King, a truly invincible existence in the entire immortal realm. He did not speak, and instead turned to look at the young man beside him. This young saint broke into a smile, as warm as a spring breeze, but he radiated a bone-deep coldness that was like ice. That was a kind of pride that was not apparent from the surface. In truth, this kind of person was truly the most arrogant. Their condescension of others was bone-deep. "I am Hu Feng," he introduced himself. "How should I address you, sir?" "Mi Yuan," the Star Sand Saint replied. If this was another setting, he naturally did not have to bother with a small saint, but now, this small saint was the representative of a Saint King. He had to be polite. "Lord Mi." Hu Feng bowed again, and then said, "Recently a senior from my clan has disappeared. Going by the prediction of my clan ancestor, this grandfather of mine should have died here. Does Lord Mi know who was his murderer?" The Star Sand Saint couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. Though Hu Feng had been polite, every word was sharp. He was asking him if he was the murderer. Wasn't that very obvious? In this place, there was no other great saint besides you, so who else could kill a small saint? Thankfully, the Star Sand Saint had prepared himself, and replied, "Indeed I do know. This person's name is Ling Han." "Oh, please clearly talk about the background of this man," Hu Feng said calmly, but a sliver of killing intent was already seeping from his eyes. "This person was originally a student of my academy, and had just broken through to the Eternal River tier recently. Lord Mi, don't tell me that grandfather of mine has been killed by an Eternal River tier?" Hu Feng interrupted his words, a mocking smile appearing on his face. "Even if you wanted to lie, you had to make up a believable excuse, right? An Eternal River tier killing a saint. Why weren't you claiming that pigs could fly while you were at it?" The Star Sand Saint continued. "That is indeed the case, because Ling Han possessed a drop of Saint King blood essence." He also related the matter of the 3 Phoenix Kings pulling a war chariot. This was the agreement that had been reached after his discussion with Ling Han, because Ling Han was sure that this would cause the 8 Stones Forbidden Land to overlook the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy and concentrate all their attention on him. Hu Feng was about to continue saying something when Saint King Hu Feng suddenly waved a hand. The air of primal chaos on his face even dispersed a little, and he said, "That chariot, as well as those 3 Phoenix Kings, talk in further detail about them." Though he had restrained himself very much, the urgency in his tone could still be heard. Hu Feng was surprised, but he immediately recalled something. Suddenly he, too, became excited. The Star Sand Saint hid nothing, and explained the whole matter. Hu Luo's hands formed a strange divine seal. Streaks of divine light glimmered, and multiple seals appeared behind him. His whole person had become abstract. He was clearly standing there, yet it seemed as if he did not exist at all, which was incredibly bizarre. The Star Sand Saint knew that this was the other merging with the great Tao of the heaven and earth. He was making a prediction. After a while, Saint King Hu Luo finally stopped. The air of primal chaos on his face lessened considerably, and an aged face could be seen. In fact, there were even a few drops of sweat. He nodded at Hu Feng and said, "The matter should be more or less like that. You must immediately set out and hunt down this despicable boy." He transmitted the message through divine sense, so only Hu Feng could hear it. "The treasure left behind by the Heavenly River King has serious implications. If I left the Forbidden Land for too long, it would definitely draw the suspicion of the other Forbidden Lands. Hence, I will delegate this matter to you." "Yes, ancestor." Hu Feng respectfully obeyed. Saint King Hu Luo bore a deep fondness for this junior. This was the future hope of the Hu clan. He had entered into the saint tier after merely cultivating for 13,000 years, which was the first in the history of the Hu clan. Thus, it was inevitable that he would be a little bit long-winded. "This boy killed Ingmu, and has thus established a relation of karma with our Hu clan. With your abilities, it would not be difficult for you to predict the other's whereabouts. I will gift you a drop of blood essence as well, just in case." Hu Luo condensed a drop of Saint King blood essence, and handed it to Hu Feng. For him, this was also an extremely great loss. He had to immediately return to the Forbidden Land to rest. Otherwise, it would affect his lifespan. Furthermore, he was about to experience the immortal tribulation soon. If he was not in his prime condition, it was highly possible that he could be severed by the heaven and earth. If it was not due to the fact that the treasure trove of the Heavenly River King was too important, he naturally would not undergo such a massive loss. Unfortunately, he could not personally commence pursuit. What if that drew the suspicion of the other Forbidden Lands? Then it was possible that the 8 Stones Forbidden Land would be like how the Heavenly River King had been, and become the target of their combined forces. "I understand." Hu Feng nodded. He, too, formed a seal to predict, and soon focused his gaze on one corner of the galaxy. Suddenly, a golden path stretched out beneath his feet. In merely a single step, he had already traveled a boundless distance. Saint King Hu Luo looked at the Star Sand Saint, and calmly stated, "Your disciple killed my clansman. What do you think should be done?" This meant that he was asking for compensation. The Star Sand Saint hurriedly answered, "This junior is willing to make up for it." Saint King Hu Luo nodded. He would only stay for 1 to 2 days, and would then have to return to the Forbidden Land. He was not the only person that knew how to make a prediction. If he stayed outside for too long, and another person decided to make a prediction on a whim, that kind of result was something he could not accept. His eyes focused on the galaxy, and revealed a strong hint of anticipation. He was filled with confidence in Hu Feng. This junior would definitely settle the matter well. Ling Han steered the cloud-piercing shuttle, traveling through the galaxy, and aiming straight for the cloud apex planet. But after a mere 2 days, a golden pathway stretched over from the depths of the universe, and quickly surpassed the cloud-piercing shuttle. A figure flashed, and a young man had already appeared on the golden pathway, blocking the course of the cloud-piercing shuttle. "Please stop for a moment. I would like to ask some questions." This young man wore a warm smile as if he was greeting an old friend. Chapter 1538 A Torrent of Abuse. Chapter 1538 A Torrent of Abuse. This was very strange. In the desolate and cold galaxy, A man stood in your path, and hailed you down for a chat like he was your next-door neighbor. But this was the galaxy here. A saint from the Hu clan, Ling Han immediately confirmed internally. Aside from this forbidden land that was expert in prediction, he did not offend any other saints. If it was claimed that it just coincidentally happened to be some other saint that had stopped him in his path on a paltry whim, he truly would not believe that. He exited the cloud-piercing shuttle, and put the cloud-piercing shuttle away into the black tower with a wave of his right hand. Then, he looked at that young man. This man was really frighteningly young. His brimming vitality could not be faked. He was filled with youthful energy that seemed like it could tear a hole into the skies. From the 8 stones forbidden land? Ling Han asked. Since he had come to hunt him down, there was naturally no need for him to be polite. He very much despised this kind of hypocritical and murderous character. This young man naturally was Hu Feng. He was still smiling. With the lofty position of a saint, especially one that had walked out from a forbidden land, he naturally would not take to heart the resistance of a mere ant. However world-shakingly you were cursing, what person would take the mad chirping of a bird outside his window seriously? He broke into a smile and said, Since you know that I have come from the 8 stones forbidden land, you must be the one I am looking for. He paused, and continued, My name is Hu Feng. You may address me directly by my name. This was really humility to a certain extent. A high and noble saint actually allowed an eternal river-tear to address him directly by name. Just how amiable was he? It was too deliberate. What a fake. Ling Han shook his head internally. If the large black dog was here, he definitely would have innumerable negative and derisive words to spout. Too bad this damn dog was glad to be in his proper surroundings in the academy, and simply did not leave with him. Of course, Ling Han did not want to bring it along either. Wasn't that just looking for his own discomfort? Ling Han smiled as well, and said, My name is Ling Han. You, too, can address me directly by name. When Hu Feng heard this, a muscle involuntarily twitched in his cheek. He was a saint, and if he allowed others to address him directly, that was him being humble and amiable. But even an eternal river-tear like you dared act like that? Fuck. I gave you an inch, and you planned to take a mile. His tone darkened, as he said, You killed a member of our Hu clan, and you think you can flee? Ling Han smiled instead and said, I will try my best, and will absolutely not disappoint your expectations. Hu Feng felt another muscle twitch in his cheek again. Those words from him were naturally filled with sarcasm, yet Ling Han actually answered him directly. You think I hope that you can flee? Then what kind of trash would a saint like me be, not being capable of apprehending even an eternal river-tear? He was only wary that Ling Han still possessed the Saint King blood essence. Though he was sure that the latter should only have a single drop, and had already used it, it was best to be sure. He was a very careful person. There was no rush to make a move. Without the Saint King blood essence, where could he flee to? Just use whatever tricks you have, Hu Feng stated calmly. Ling Han had very sharp senses, and added with the fact that he had spent a long period of time with such great caustic characters like the large black dog, the old ginseng, and the rabbit, he was expertly skilled at grasping the hearts of others. He laughed and said, Though you put on a very amiable act, you are actually testing out the waters to see if I still have any Saint King blood essence. If I didn't, you would probably immediately turn hostile, right? He had hit the nail on the head. Hu Feng's expression did not change. He still had that level of subtlety in him. Though he had been cultivating in the last millennia and more, he was naturally extremely intelligent and very strong and self-disciplined to be able to advance into the saint tier so quickly. He chuckled and replied, You are but a mere eternal river-tear. What right do you have to act insolent in front of me? Tisk tsk. Ling Han shook his head. If I have to be honest, you are simply cheap. Your own clan senior has been killed by my hand, and you still act so friendly. Fuck, I have never seen trash like you. If you had been my grandson, I would have broken your wretched leg a long time ago. This. Hu Feng was dumbfounded. This ant actually dared to hurl abuse at him. Cheap? Trash? Wretched leg? No matter how well he could act, he would not be able to tolerate that. If he could still bear having someone point directly at his nose and throw insults at him, wouldn't he be a tortoise? How dare you! Finally, he could not hold back from moving. Even his expression was slightly twisted in livid fury. If anyone from the 8 Stones Forbidden Land was here, they definitely would be filled with disbelief. That was because Hu Feng had lacked youthful temper since childhood, and had been called an immovable boulder. Even if the heavens collapsed in front of him, his expression would not change. When they had been playing when they were children, even if someone had snatched his toy away, he would not even cry or make a fuss. But now, even the boulder had been angered, and lost all his composure. This was practically unimaginable. As the saying goes, one would be the product of his environment. Who were those beside Ling Han? They were beings like the large black dog, the old ginseng, and the rabbit. If one stayed long enough with them, and they were really intent on angering you, they definitely were capable of driving you to mad fury. Ling Han had already channeled the indestructible heavens scroll. Boom! When this strike landed, he was sent flying thousands of miles away. The galaxy did not form any kind of resistance for him. If he had not taken the initiative to stop, he could continue to fly all the way, and would only stop when he crashed into some meteor or star. Hu Feng was involuntarily stunned. This man actually managed to endure a blow from him? This was nature-defying. This was nature-defying. The Star Sand Saint had only said that Ling Han killed Huangmu by channeling a drop of Star Sand Saint King blood essence, and concealed that wager that had been previously made. Thus, neither Hu Feng nor Huangmu knew what terrifying height Ling Han's defenses could attain. This definitely was not the might of a tool, but the ability of this person himself. What kind of cultivation technique was this? Hu Feng's eyes abruptly lit up. As the prodigy of a forbidden land, he naturally knew a great turmoil had 8 Stones tribe leaving the celestial realm. But in comparison, the 8 Stones tribe could not be considered as top tier among those forces that had been exiled. It was said that there were even celestial kings that had died in that kind of war. The Heavenly River King had obtained this kind of inheritance, and that was why he managed to rise up in such a short period of time, and became able to challenge the Forbidden Lands. This brat had to have obtained the treasures that the Heavenly River King had left behind. In fact, he had already successfully cultivated the techniques from within. Otherwise, how could he possibly be capable of blocking the blow from a saint? Immediately, his greed blazed. He made another move, and grabbed out at Ling Han. Ling Han could not dodge, and could only channel the indestructible heavens scroll to endure another strike. Boom! Golden light emanated from his whole body, and he was like an undefeatable war god. He again successfully blocked this blow. He gritted his teeth internally. This Hu Feng was even more powerful than Huangmu. He had only suffered 2 blows, and the origin power inside his body was already completely exhausted. He laughed loudly. What 8 Stones Forbidden Land? What damn saint? You can only do so much. Little Feng, I'm not going to stay around to play with you. Next time, I will come again to teach you a lesson. As he said this, he directly entered into the Black Tower. The moment he entered into the Black Tower, he flopped onto the ground, gasping out in pain. Hu Feng's second strike had still caused him some level of damage, causing even his godly bones to crackle and pop as if they were about to break. Going by the look of things, I may not be able to take a full power blow from a great saint. Ling Han sighed. The so-called strike from a saint was only limited to a medium saint. The heavenly body tier corresponded to a small saint, whereas the eternal river tier corresponded to medium saint. If that kind of complaint was heard by others, they would definitely be strangling him in fury. Fuck, aside from a freak like you, what eternal river tier in this whole world could survive a blow from a saint? Chapter 1539 Relentless Pursui. Chapter 1539 Relentless Pursui. Hu Feng was stunned. Though he was a saint that stood at the peak of this galaxy, he was still completely stunned. Where is he? He knew of spatial god tools, and he himself could forge that kind of tool, though it would be very exhausting for him. Furthermore, he was a small saint, after all. The size of a spatial god tool he refined would be very limited. But this did not hinder him from knowing that even a spatial god tool should have a form. From the outside, it actually was not all that different from a spatial spirit tool. It had to take some kind of shape. It could be a ring, it could be a small mountain that could be held in the palm of one's hand, or it could be a toy-like farmhouse, but no matter what, it had to be visible and touchable. Yet Ling Han had vanished, and nothing was left behind on the scene. Teleportation? Impossible! Hu Feng shook his head internally. He had already used regulations to cover the area. Even if Ling Han used a teleportation seal, he could not possibly break through his restriction. He still had that much confidence in himself. The only possibility was that he had hidden in a spatial god tool, but where was this god tool? Hu Feng spread out his divine sense and searched the galaxy. Thankfully, this galaxy was extremely clean, and there were no meteors or fragments left behind or shooting stars. Very quickly, he had finished his inspection. He found nothing. Why was it like this? While Hu Feng was dumbfounded, a strong excitement also rose up in his heart. A method that could hoodwink a saint, just how amazing was that? This boy had to have obtained an amazing precious treasure of the celestial realm. Those years ago, even the heavenly river king should not have been so awesome. Otherwise, wouldn't he have managed to survive the fatal calamity? This person must have obtained some other fated opportunity. He might have obtained a true precious treasury, a celestial tool. His eyes shone, and even his voice was shaking slightly. A celestial tool. This was a treasure that was superior to all. Even in the celestial realm, a celestial tool was still supreme. That was because only a celestial king could possess a celestial tool. In fact, the majority of celestial kings had not obtained a celestial tool, because celestial material was too rare. Not only was a celestial tool something that only a celestial king could possess, it was only in the possession of those few big shots among the celestial kings. "Ha! This is a great fortune that the heavens have gifted me!" Hu Feng laughed loudly. He had come into contact with Ling Han. This was true evidence, and the latter was an unknown number of years away from reaching the saint tier. Wouldn't that be enough for him to snatch Ling Han's good fortune from him? If he gained a celestial tool and a celestial king technique, when they charged into the celestial realm in future, not only could he become a celestial king, he would also become a big shot among celestial kings. The whole celestial realm would tremble with just a yawn from him. The more he thought about it, the more pleased he was. He couldn't stop a smile from blooming on his face, but he hurriedly suppressed his excitement and joy. This was still undecided yet. What was the most important now was naturally to find Ling Han first. Otherwise, all else was pointless. He began an even wider search. He would definitely not return to the 8 Stones Forbidden Land without finding Ling Han and obtaining the Celestial King cultivation technique and the Celestial Tool. He searched till a very far location, yet experienced a sudden shock. He saw a silvery streak of light sweep past, flying rapidly into the distance. It was the cloud-piercing shuttle. That brat has appeared. Hu Feng's eyes suddenly lit up, and he quickly went off in pursuit. A golden pathway immediately appeared, and went off in pursuit of the cloud-piercing shuttle. The speed of it was even faster. A saint had comprehended the highest level of regulations of the heaven and earth, and it could be claimed that they were one with the heaven and earth. Only saints could compete in speed with another saint. Xiao, in only 3 steps, Hu Feng had already caught up, but when he stretched out a hand to capture the cloud-piercing shuttle, he only caught empty air. It had vanished again, the vessel and the passenger together. Hu Feng felt a little driven mad. It was clear that the precious treasure was right in front of him, and the one who possessed it was merely in the low extreme of the eternal river tier. He obviously should be able to capture him just by stretching out his hand, yet why did he keep failing to do so? This time, he simply sat down in a cross-legged position right then and there, and waited. After a while, the cloud-piercing shuttle again appeared, yet it was a few hundred miles away. The strike he had sent out just now had given rise to a wave in the galaxy, and the black tower went with the flow, so it naturally floated very far away. A golden pathway stretched out, and Hu Feng once again pursued, but when he caught up with it, the cloud-piercing shuttle had naturally vanished again. Ah! He roared in fury, and only felt incredibly sullen. He was an honorable saint that could overturn the seas and rivers with a single thought. A full-power attack from him, and even a heavenly body tier would be shattered, yet he was actually unable to apprehend someone who was only in the low extreme of the eternal river tier all this while. Within the Black Tower. "What are you calling out for? I am also feeling very depressed," Ling Han muttered in displeasure. Becoming the target of a saint, he could only creep around like a snail. Going by this trend, when would he reach Cloud Apex Planet? There was nothing to be done. Hu Feng presently was like a shark that had smelled blood, and would definitely keep chasing after him relentlessly. Fine then. With a saint targeting me, this pressure is heavy enough, Ling Han thought optimistically. After a day of rest, his origin power had recovered, and he exited the Black Tower again. When Hu Feng caught up with him, he chose to confront the latter. After a consecutive 2 times, he hid once more into the Black Tower. Who? Ling Han panted heavily. They both are small saints, yet the gap is truly big. I am sure that this Hu Feng would be able to defeat the Tranquil Heart Saint and the other saints within 100 moves. However, having a saint pounding me into shape, my origin power has become increasingly compact, and this is indirectly improving my abilities. If this was another person, this definitely would be seeking death, but Ling Han was different. He had cultivated the indestructible Heaven's Scroll, and was like a supreme divine metal. The more he was pressured and hammered, the sturdier he would become. Of course, the precondition was that it did not exceed his limits. Otherwise, that would really be seeking death. And in this way, Ling Han would fight up front with Hu Feng twice a day, and after every battle, he would experience some level of comprehension. What eternal riveter could genuinely spar with a saint every day? Putting aside the question of whether you could or not, what saint would have so much free time on their hands? The present situation was unique, and Hu Feng had become Ling Han's best sparring partner. After a month had passed, Ling Han actually managed to successfully endure 3 moves from Hu Feng. Though he only managed to recover his injuries with the direct use of a drop of indestructible true fluid after this one move, it proved that Ling Han had obtained massive improvement a month ago. It was definitely impossible for him to take 3 moves from Hu Feng. This caused Hu Feng extreme shock. That rate of improvement was really too frightening. Could it be that he would be personally bringing a monster into existence? But it was impossible for him to simply turn around and leave. A Celestial King technique, a Celestial tool. Whichever of these 2 items was not something that he could simply give up. Even if he had to chase him to the corners of the universe, he was determined to apprehend Ling Han. In any case, the latter had killed a member of the Hu clan, and formed a relation of karma with them. No matter where he fled to, it would be useless. He would be able to find him. Another 3 months passed, and Ling Han could already calmly take 3 moves from Hu Feng. Furthermore, he had also formed the final heavenly body, and reached the true peak stage of the low extreme. On this day, he did not come out to fight with Hu Feng again. Instead, he went into isolation underneath the reincarnation tree to break through to the medium extreme. He could give up whenever he wanted, but Hu Feng had to be completely focused. His divine sense was tense the whole day, and remained like that for a continuous several months. Even if he was a saint, he was still slightly tired. But the biggest problem here was that Ling Han had actually not appeared for a whole month's time, which made him feel even worse. Chapter 1540 Enduring the Heavenly Tribulation, Scaring You to Death. Chapter 1540 Enduring the Heavenly Tribulation, Scaring You to Death. On one hand, Hu Feng did not dare to relax at all, because it was possible that Ling Han could appear at any time. The initiative was in his hands. On the other, Ling Han's disappearance caused him to feel anxious. Could it be that he had used some other method and fled? The moment this thought came to him, he was burning with anxiety. Thankfully, he knew how to predict. Ling Han had killed Huingmu, and thus formed a relation of karma with the Huingmu. It was so strong that even if there were a few hundred galaxies separating them, he could easily see the link of karma between them. However, the moment Ling Han vanished, the link of karma would also disappear with him, which was incredibly strange. Vanishing means that he is still in the celestial tool. I can still stand guard here and wait for him to reappear, he said to himself, forcibly suppressing his unease. Though he was a saint, the time since he had formed his Tao was much, much too short. In terms of calmness, he naturally could not compare to the experienced veteran saints. If it was Huluo, he would definitely not have any self-doubt, because he was sure that he was the strongest in the world, and no matter what Ling Han did, he would never be able to escape from his grasp. Just when his worry became more and more serious, an air of instability was sensed. Ling Han had finally reappeared. Ha! Hu Feng laughed loudly. His heavy mood immediately vanished. With a step, he was already rushing towards Ling Han. Are you sure you want to do that? Ling Han broke into a strange smile. Pun! He had taken a strike from Hu Feng head-on, and slid back a few hundred miles, yet a mass of dark clouds appeared in the galaxy in an incredibly strange manner, and shrouded the skies above his head. Hu Feng suddenly stopped. Heavenly tribulation. This guy went off into isolation for a month, so he had been breaking through to the medium extreme. Hu Feng was really shocked. He had unlocked the barrier to the medium extreme of the eternal river tier in merely 1 month. Was he even human? No, he could not allow this man to grow even further. Otherwise, this guy's ability to resist blows would become more and more frightening, and his cultivation level would also become higher and higher. Perhaps one day he truly would become a match for him. No matter the cost, he had to be killed. His eyes turned cold, and he suddenly came to a decision. He would kill Ling Han in the midst of the heavenly tribulation. Though this would pull him into the heavenly tribulation as well, he had a drop of Saint King blood essence, which could allow him to possess the abilities of a great saint at his peak for a short period of time. Even with that, would he still be incapable of surviving the heavenly tribulation? He was going to do it. If he did not take this chance, Ling Han would become harder and harder to kill. Die! He forcibly charged into the area enshrouded by the heavenly tribulation, and blasted out a punch at Ling Han. He wanted to kill Ling Han. As for the treasures, he could simply search his soul. There was no need for him to be alive for that. Ling Han broke into a grin, and mumbled, "You are the one who asked for this." He channeled the indestructible heavens scroll and took another blow from Hu Feng, and in this manner, tribulation clouds also appeared above Hu Feng's head. Quang! Lightning bolts struck down. The heavenly tribulation was not going to care, and was only intent on eliminating the person undergoing the heavenly tribulation. Ling Han was unafraid. His godly bones were about to reach level 15, and he had also inscribed level 15 killing formations. Did he have to be afraid of heavenly tribulation that was merely in medium extreme level? However, he did not dare to shatter his godly bones now to undergo tempering by the heavenly tribulation. After all, there was a saint glaring at him like he was his prey. But this time, Hu Feng himself was also being attacked by the heavenly tribulation. Lightning bolts fell quickly. They were 30,000 meters wide, and who knew how many 100 million miles they were long. What he had to undergo was naturally the heavenly tribulation of a saint. Furthermore, due to Ling Han's strength, his heavenly tribulation would be considerably more frightening than any ordinary heavenly tribulation. Hu Feng forcibly interfered, so the heavenly tribulation he had to undergo would be further magnified on the basis of Ling Han's own heavenly tribulation. It would definitely be more frightening than the ordinary heavenly tribulation of other saints. Hu Feng's face immediately paled. It was not that he had not undergone the saintly tribulation before, but compared to this, it was far too inferior. Though his abilities had indeed considerably improved since that time, his improvement definitely was not that drastic. It was that brat. Hu Feng was shocked. Actually, The heavenly tribulation was the best proof of the potential that a cultivator had. When two heavenly tribulations were similarly on the level of the medium extreme of the eternal river tier, and mine was fiercer than yours, it clearly showed that the heaven and earth admitted that I posed a bigger threat, and it naturally proved that I was stronger. He wanted to kill Ling Han at all costs, but the frightening lightning was already descending like a torrential gale. He could only use his full power to parry the striking lightning bolts. Though this heavenly tribulation was frightening, he was sure that he was completely capable of safely enduring it. There was no need for him to use the Saint King blood essence. He had been guarding against the possibility that Ling Han might possess another drop of Saint King blood essence. Perhaps this was a trap that Ling Han had laid out for him, forcing him to use the Saint King blood essence. Ling Han could turn the tables around and hunt him down next. This was his trump card. He definitely could not use it outside of a crucial time that meant life or death. Thus, Hu Feng could no longer bother with attacking Ling Han, and focused his full concentration on receiving the heavenly tribulation. Very soon, he was stunned. Ling Han broke apart, and became multiple pieces. He was sure that it was definitely not the heavenly tribulation that struck Ling Han to pieces. Instead, he had taken the initiative to shatter his own godly bones. This was allowing his body to be tempered by the heavenly tribulation. Freak! Hu Feng suddenly could not accept this. He had never seen anyone undergo the heavenly tribulation in such a flamboyant manner. How were others supposed to endure this? Everyone had to prepare a good many years, and ensure that they had complete confidence before they would undergo the heavenly tribulation, but a great number of people would still die because of the heavenly tribulation. And what about him? He just carelessly underwent the heavenly tribulation, and was even tempering his godly bones like he was simply sunbathing. This was a terrible danger. Hu Feng's heart was trembling violently. If Ling Han was allowed to escape this time, then the 8 Stones Forbidden Land would face a massive problem. If Ling Han became a saint one day, he would definitely be the nightmare of all the saints in the world. That kind of man, was it even possible to kill him? He gritted his teeth, and decided to use the Saint King blood essence. He would kill Ling Han at all costs. Quang! The divine lightning fell like rain, completely submerging him. This tribulation was becoming more and more terrifying. Damn it! Hu Feng cursed internally, and had no choice but to diffuse that drop of Saint King blood essence. Otherwise, it was really possible that he would be turned into nothing under the barrage of the heavenly tribulation. The heavenly tribulation did not care for the fact that a saint like him represented the willpower of the heavenly tribulation. This was a blade in itself, only possessing the intent to kill. Break! Hu Feng sent out a punch into the skies. At this moment, the might of a Saint King spread out. He possessed the strength of a great saint, and even a heavenly tribulation was no match for him. But it was as if the heavenly tribulation had been angered. When the next bolt of lightning fell, it actually took the form of a human figure formed with lightning, rapidly blasting towards him. Hu Feng shouted in fury, yet could not ignore this. Otherwise, if he was hit by the heavenly tribulation, it was possible that a wound to his great Tao would be left on him, and it could be considered that he was done for in this lifetime. Even if the lightning figure was no match for Hu Feng, and crumbled with a single strike, the heavenly tribulation was not a living being. Very soon, lightning reformed and again took the form of a human figure, continuing its barrage of attacks on Hu Feng. Everyone knew that it was impossible for a heavenly tribulation to be dispelled. One could only endure and bear it until half a day passed, and it would be fine. Hu Feng was tightly entangled with the lightning figure. Though his abilities were obviously stronger, the lightning figure was immortal. This vexed him deeply as he could not throw the latter off his tail at all. Ling Han did not need the whole half-day's time to hammer his godly bones. About 4 hours were enough. He channeled a drop of indestructible true fluid, and his shattered bones immediately rejoined. He was completely unhurt, and his vitality was even stronger than before. He stood proudly like that in the empty void, raising his head to look at the heavenly tribulation. Allowing the heavenly tribulation to blast him, he observed and experienced the heavenly tribulation. That kind of calmness compared to Hu Feng's own sorry state made Hu Feng feel an even more explosive fury. Chapter 1541 Decided, Going to the Netherworld. 1541 Decided, Going to the Netherworld. Hu Feng had enough reason to go crazy. He had already used a drop of Saint King blood essence, but not only was he unable to apprehend Ling Han, he actually did not look as calm as the latter. Who asked him to be strong in attack, but weak in physique? The heavenly tribulation was extremely fast, and could only be blocked and not dodged. This decided that no matter how strong you were, you could only stay in a defensive position and submit to its barrage, which meant that his trait of being strong in attack was of completely no use here. Half a day passed. Without a word, Ling Han threw out the cloud-piercing shuttle and fled. Hu Feng was still undergoing the heavenly tribulation. He still had the end to undergo, and the Saint King blood essence was also completely consumed. He could only bear it head-on with his own abilities, which caused him to suffer very heavy injuries. When the heavenly tribulation dispersed, he sat down in a cross-legged position at the first instant. He had to heal his injuries. Otherwise, if he traveled with this kind of injury, it would leave behind a massive weakness for him. Ling Han had to die, but it did not mean that Hu Feng would have to throw his life into the bargain as well. Ling Han turned around to take a look, and then turned back round indifferently. The Heavenly River King was enemies with the 8 Stones Forbidden Land, but even the Heavenly River King did not request that he destroy the Forbidden Lands. He was only requested to kill the traitor, the Open Clouds King. However, having Hu Feng hunting him down all this way, Ling Han's temper was naturally stoked. He could ignore the other Forbidden Lands, but he was definitely going to raze the 8 Stones Forbidden Land to the ground. Fuck, who did they think they were? Steering the cloud-piercing shuttle, he headed rapidly in the direction of Cloud Apex Planet. Why was he going to Cloud Apex Planet? Could it be that there was someone there that could match a saint? Of course not. Ling Han was aiming to travel to the Two-Realm battlefield. Indeed, he was going to travel through the Two-Realm battlefield and enter into the Netherworld. This was the final conclusion he had reached after his discussion with the Star Sand Saint. As long as he was in the Immortal Realm, Ling Han would be forever hunted by the 8 Stones Forbidden Land. What logic was it for him to stay on guard constantly against them? Thus, Ling Han wanted to go to the Netherworld. The Netherworld had different regulations from the Immortal Realm. Even if saints went there, they would only have the power of a saint there, and would not be able to channel the corresponding regulations. Thus, as long as he entered into the Netherworld, the 8 Stones Forbidden Land would not be able to predict his whereabouts. And Ling Han had obtained the demonic power source, which could allow him to perfectly fit into the Netherworld. There was absolutely no need to worry that he would encounter the combined attacks of the cultivators from the Netherworld. Additionally, Ling Han was actually not too far from the Saint tier. He should also consider fusing the regulations of the 2 realms to reach a higher peak. Then he should use this event as an opportunity to set off on his travels to the Netherworld. When I return, I will definitely destroy you all, Ling Han muttered in displeasure. In any case, the galactic coordinates had already been set, so he simply entered into the Black Tower. In this manner, even if Hu Feng recovered from his injuries, he would not be able to predict his whereabouts. At most, he could only find his current location. He began to inscribe new formation patterns on his godly bones. Before leaving, he had prepared himself adequately. Naturally, he had long since chosen a level 16 killing formation. Limitless 9 Deaths formation. Among level 16 killing formations, it ranked number 1. Too bad, he did not have any saint-grade formation in his possession. Without reaching saint tier, there was no way for him to practice such formations. Even if he forcibly inscribed the formation patterns, it would be useless. He would not be able to draw on the resonance with the power of the heaven and earth, and release its true might from that. He would just have to deal with it when he reached that point. Underneath the reincarnation tree, Ling Han earnestly cultivated. After spending close to a whole year, he finally comprehended the formation fully, and then began to inscribe the formation patterns on his godly bones. 1, 2, 3, the Limitless 9 Deaths formation had a total of 1080 formation patterns, and even one in the consummate level of the Eternal River tier would not be able to inscribe this formation in his body. Firstly, there were too many variables at play, and it would be difficult to control it. Secondly, his body would not be able to bear it. Before the killing formation killed others, it would wound the user first. This was practically self-torture. However, Ling Han was different. The reincarnation tree had given him enough time for comprehension, and the indestructible Heaven's Scroll allowed him to have sturdy godly bones, which enabled him to accomplish a grand feat that others could not possibly accomplish. He merely used 21 days, and inscribed 11 Limitless 9 Deaths formations in his body. 11, not 10. The 9 heavens flame had become stronger and stronger. Thus, it allowed him to inscribe formation patterns on his godly bones with even thinner brush strokes. Hence, even though the Limitless 9 Deaths formation had higher requirements, Ling Han still inscribed even more killing formations than before. If it had been the Blood Crow formation at present, he probably should have been able to inscribe 20-odd such formations. After such a long time, the cloud-piercing shuttle naturally had long arrived at Cloud Apex Planet. It sank to the bottom of an ocean. Ling Han, the Empress, and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden exited the Black Tower, stored the cloud-piercing shuttle away, and headed towards the two-realm battlefield. Close to 2 years had passed, and the two women had also made much improvement. Needless to say, the Empress with her supreme divine fetus, which was even more awesome than Gu Daoyi's had been, had advanced another step further in less than 2 years. She had already arrived at the late stage of the medium extreme of the Eternal River tier, and further enlarged the distance between her and Ling Han. The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was not outdone, either. In future, her accomplishments would definitely be incapable of comparing to a divine fetus. But now that she had gained the inheritance of 3 Saint Kings, her bloodline had been greatly improved. She, too, had advanced into the peak stage of the medium extreme of the Eternal River tier. "We have to rush. That maniac should catch up in a few days," Ling Han said. The two women nodded. At the same time, in the far-off galaxy, Hu Feng, who was presently sitting in a cross-legged position, suddenly opened his eyes. He could see the link of karma again. However, after being washed by the heavenly tribulation, this link of karma had already become extremely pale. It would probably completely vanish if Ling Han underwent another heavenly tribulation. Enduring the heavenly tribulation meant being reborn, a complete transformation, so it naturally would wash away one's previous karma. There was nowhere for him to run. Hu Feng took a step. The golden pathway stretched out, and quickly rushed in the direction of Cloud Apex Planet. The journey would take 4 days. He had calculated it. Ling Han and his group were traveling towards the two-realm battlefield. After advancing into the Eternal River tier, their speed was naturally shocking. In merely 1 day, they had once more returned to this place. In this place, they had left behind many memories, and the strongest was naturally Ding Zizhen, who had spent who knew how many 100 million years to lay out a fatal trap to revive his daughter, but in the end, his daughter had immediately committed suicide right after she had been revived. "Let's go see the Purple Moon Divine Maiden," Ling Han suggested. She had taken much care of the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. However, to avoid dragging the Purple Moon Divine Maiden into this matter as well, Ling Han did not accompany the other two. Instead, he had the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden and Empress Luan Xing go together. Aside from that, he had long since refined the level 15 divine pill that the Purple Moon Divine Maiden had requested, and he brought it along with him. This was considered repayment for her favor. The favor was repaid, but it did not mean they were no longer friends. If the Purple Moon Divine Maiden was in trouble, Ling Han would still be willing to lend a helping hand. The two women did not dare to take too much time, and returned after only taking 4 hours. "Lady Purple Moon told me to thank you on her behalf," the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden said. Ling Han being so serious about this matter was naturally because she was involved, and this made her feel a sweetness rise up in her heart. Meanwhile, Ling Han leaned close to her ear, and whispered, Then shall we unlock a new position tonight? The heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden rolled her eyes at him. This bad guy kept thinking of new ways to play with her. Wasn't she just slightly fierce to him in the past? Why did he have to keep remembering it, and keep it in mind constantly? He was really petty. However, the moment she turned around, she lowered her head slightly, a rosy blush coloring her cheeks, and nodded almost indiscernibly. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh. Chapter 1542 First Arrived. 1542 First Arrived. Ling Han and his group did not waste any time. They entered into the two-realm battlefield, and headed in the direction of the Netherworld. Ling Han was not the only one. Both Empress Wan Xing and the heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden aimed to enter into the celestial realm, so they naturally could not simply aim for becoming saints. Thus, the two women also had to enter into the Netherworld to experience the different regulations of the heaven and earth. They were the advanced party. In the future, the Rain Emperor, Ding Ping, and the others would also enter into the Netherworld. Of course, if Ling Han's rate of cultivation was fast enough, he would be able to draw them all into the Black Tower and take them with him into the Celestial Realm. The regulations of the Celestial Realm were complete, so there was no need for them to comprehend on both ends. The group of three traveled, and gradually advanced deeper into the Netherworld. After entering a certain area, there were fewer and fewer cultivators from the immortal realm. On the contrary, there were more and more cultivators of the Netherworld. This meant that they were close to entering into the Netherworld. This was very apparent. At first, the three of them had looked normal, yet now there were flames of light bursting skywards from them. The farther they traveled, the more obvious these flames of light were. It was practically like a sun in the midst of darkness. Furthermore, this was unrelated to cultivation level. The flames of light Ling Han and his group exuded were of the same brightness, and the fact that Ling Han and the Empress were both in the Eternal River tier did not make any difference. People from the immortal realm! A Netherworld cultivator appeared, and approached them with a quick stride. Now that they were here, it was the people from the Netherworld that looked very normal instead. They no longer had that evil aura that surged up into the skies. This was a heavenly body tier elite. He should have just recently advanced into this level as his aura was still not very stable. He was also considerably young, a prideful expression on his face. There were pitifully few that had advanced into the heavenly body tier at such a young age like him. This naturally was something to be proud of. After all, the overall level of cultivation in this galaxy was not the highest level. A heavenly body tier absolutely was capable of being considered an elite. His eyes swept over the Empress, and a stunned expression involuntarily appeared on his face. So beautiful! Because the other party was from the immortal realm, he naturally did not have the slightest reservations. He directly leaped over, and stretched out a hand to grab the Empress. Ling Han and his group had all curbed their aura, and he could not estimate the cultivation levels of these three people. But in his opinion, what kind of elite could actually appear in this battlefield? The reason why he had come here was because he had broken through to the heavenly body tier, and he was here to show off a bit, and strut around in front of his rivals from the past. Otherwise, wouldn't it be like wearing richly embroidered clothes in the dark? Killing intent immediately leaked out from the Empress. There was only one man in this world that could touch her, but it was definitely not this person in front of her. Yet Ling Han moved before she did, and slapped him repeatedly with both hands. Pa 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 pa. In an instant he had struck the other a few dozen times, and the man was completely knocked unconscious from the barrage. Let's go. There is no need to drop down to the level of this kind of person, Ling Han said with a smile. And the Empress naturally listened to Ling Han. Ling Han channeled the demonic power source, and his aura immediately changed. The flames of light faded at a visible rate, and there was not the slightest bit difference between him and a person of the Netherworld anymore. The Empress and the heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden did not have that kind of ability. To avoid trouble, they thus entered the Black Tower, and the Azura Demon Emperor appeared in their place. My great master, this little Azura misses you dearly! The Azura Demon Emperor immediately started to flatter him like crazy, yet he quickly paused. This is the Netherworld. He had actually returned to his homeland. My great master, have you come to conquer the Netherworld? He was excited, and couldn't hold back from wanting to make threatening gestures, and become a lackey that used his powerful connection as an intimidation tactic. Conquer your head, we are here to take refuge. Ling Han gave him a kick. Master, who is hunting us down? The Azura Demon Emperor immediately asked cautiously. Just a saint, Ling Han said, playing down the level of danger they were in. Pooh! The Azura Demon Emperor immediately spluttered. Saint, and he said just? Master, you have already reached a level that even this little Azura would break my neck just to look up at you. Let's go! Ling Han drew out the cloud-piercing shuttle, and chose a random direction. Though a saint could not easily make a prediction here, saints were still too strong. Their divine sense could wrap around the whole planet. He had no wish to be found by Hu Feng. Moreover, he was not merely here to take refuge. He also wanted to cultivate in the Netherworld, so he naturally had to go to various places in the Netherworld. The overall level of cultivation here was slightly lower, and they didn't even have any saints. If he stayed here, all he could do was just trample some profligate young masters. It was quite fun to do something like that occasionally, but if it was done too frequently, it would become boring. Trampling prodigies was more interesting. He did not have a clear destination, either, and allowed the cloud-piercing shuttle to travel quickly in the galaxy. Actually, there was no real difference between the galaxies of the Immortal Realm and the Netherworld. Only the regulations of the heaven and earth were different, which led to a slight variation in the cultivation world of both realms. But in truth, this was merely different means of achieving the same end. Ling Han and his group were all experiencing the regulations of the Netherworld. After coming to this place, they were no longer able to draw upon the regulations that they had initially grasped. They only had useless tools and power that corresponded to their cultivation level. This was equivalent to cultivating from the very beginning again. Thankfully, the Black Tower was really a precious treasure. Whichever realm it was in, it could fit in. As long as Ling Han was willing, the regulations of the Netherworld could continuously enter into the Black Tower, so it was the same as actually being in the Netherworld. Ling Han and his group were all comprehending Tao underneath the reincarnation tree. They wanted to cultivate the regulations of the Netherworld as soon as possible, for only then would they be able to fit in better into the Netherworld. Furthermore, without the support of this kind of regulations, they would not be able to show the abilities that they should possess, either. Underneath the reincarnation tree, their rate of advancement was too fast. They improved with every instant. After all, their cultivation levels were still very high. Hu Feng was only more than a day later than them. He, too, arrived at the two-realm battlefield, and his brow involuntarily wrinkled in a frown. He immediately understood Ling Han's intention. The latter planned to flee into the Netherworld. In that way, he would not be able to predict his whereabouts anymore, because the regulations of the heaven and earth were different. He couldn't help but smirk. This was indeed not a bad idea. However, this brat still had a link of karma with the Hu clan. This would not simply disperse just because he had entered into the Netherworld. If Ling Han was a saint, and had even cultivated a certain secret technique, he would be able to see the link of karma and sever it easily. This was not any kind of impressive means in the celestial realm, but in the immortal realm? Ho ho. Moreover, Ling Han still had a very long way to go before reaching the saint tier. Otherwise, what need was there for him to run? He pondered this as he strolled slowly in the two-realm battlefield. He was following the link of karma that Ling Han had left behind. Soon after, he saw a man that had been knocked out. He stretched out his hand, and the latter immediately regained consciousness with a wave. That naturally was the unfortunate guy that Ling Han had knocked unconscious. His line of thought was still paused on the moment he had fallen unconscious. The moment he woke up, he loudly roared. "How dare you! You actually dare sneak up and attack your Lord Jia! Take this!" He clearly knew that Ling Han and his group were stronger than him, but he was not afraid. That was because this was the territory of the Netherworld, so how could he appear weak? How dared the trash from the immortal realm come here and act arrogant? He shot out a palm that struck towards Hufeng. Why is it not the three people from before? Forget it, who cares? In any case, they were all people from the immortal realm, so he would beat him all the same. Hufeng was involuntarily startled. What was going on here? Not only did a mere eternal riveter like Ling Han dare to go against him, even a heavenly body tier dared to slap him now. Did he not see that he was a saint? Though he had always liked to put on a mask of amicability, this did not mean that he really did not have the airs of a saint. Could it be that he had been in the Forbidden Land for too long, and the whole world had changed without his knowledge? Chapter 1543 A Forthright Person. Chapter 1543 A Forthright Person. Pa! Hufeng slapped that unfortunate fool, causing the latter to spin a few circles in one spot, becoming completely dizzy. You should have seen this man. With a wave of his hand, Hufeng used his origin power to condense into Ling Han's appearance. It was very lifelike. For a saint, this was naturally an easy trick. Describe in detail your encounter with him. Though he thought that Ling Han wanted to flee into the Netherworld, it was still possible that the latter was deliberately misleading him. Thus, he absolutely had to confirm it. After all, when he entered into the Netherworld, he would not be able to channel the regulations of the immortal realm, and his strength would fall greatly. It should be known that outside of regulations, a saint was not much different from an eternal riveter. Their power originated from the number of heavenly bodies they possessed. In theory, an eternal riveter could even surpass a saint in the number of heavenly bodies. Hufeng had no choice but to be cautious. After entering into the Netherworld, he was no longer a saint. Instead, he would be a high-level eternal riveter. That unfortunate guy was also secretly cursing his bad luck. What was going on here? He was an elite of the heavenly body tier here. Why was it he was no match for anyone he came up against? Was there any justice left in this world? But when he saw how Hufeng's eyes had turned ice cold, he hurriedly related his encounter with Ling Han and his group from the very beginning to the end. Actually, this was really very simple. Hufeng turned around to leave. That unfortunate guy was just about to breathe a sigh of relief when his whole body suddenly exploded and became innumerable pieces. He should have gone to the Netherworld. Let me check the link of karma. He entered into the Netherworld, his whole figure radiating flames of light like the sun. He could be seen from at least 10,000 miles away. He was too dazzling and bright. In merely a short while, a great many people had charged over, all of them looking hostile. A man of the immortal realm actually dared barge in all alone. Was he tired of life already? Hufeng smiled slightly, his smile amiable. I am looking for a person. None should come and disturb me. Otherwise, I would not mind committing mass murder. In his eyes, whether it was the immortal realm or the Netherworld, all living beings were incredibly lowly. No matter how many he killed, it was nothing to him. Insolent freak from the immortal realm, you come to our Netherworld and actually still dare boast shamelessly. You are an intolerable bully. These people all moved, beginning to attack Hufeng. Hufeng's expression became cold. With a wave of his right hand, all of them were suddenly ground into a shower of blood. He could no longer predict Ling Han's whereabouts, but the link of karma was still present. However, after he pursued for a while, this link also snapped. No matter where you are, I will find you. Hufeng did not rashly pursue. Otherwise, it could be an action that defeated his purpose. It would allow the distance between the two of them to become even farther. Ling Han had to think that he was unable to predict his whereabouts, yet did not know that the link of karma still existed. Hence, Ling Han would definitely be careless, and think that he had thrown him off his tail. Then, when he next appeared, it would be the time for him to deliver a fatal strike. He would no longer proceed with great fanfare, but would rather quietly approach, and then deliver a strike that would kill him. However, he was also slightly anxious because a man from the immortal realm entering into the Netherworld was practically a living target. He was really too obvious. Hopefully, Ling Han would not be killed by someone from the Netherworld. Otherwise, he would really have no idea where he should find the Celestial King technique and the Celestial tool. Under the reincarnation tree, Ling Han and his group had already undergone a long period of seclusion. They had tentatively grasped the regulations of the Netherworld. Bloodline was one aspect of it, and physique was another, but this would only allow cultivators to stand at a higher starting point, and start off with a faster dash. However, the true weapon that could allow one to ascend the path of cultivation was actually comprehension ability. At this moment, it could not be more obvious. 3 years later, Ling Han's grasp of the regulations of the Netherworld had already advanced into the middle stage of the low extreme of the Eternal River tier, and the limitless 9 Deaths formation was not affected by the regulations of the two realms. If this formation was activated, he could even kill an elite at the peak stage of the consummate level of the Eternal River tier. Only someone who had cultivated the pinnacle level could be a match for him. The Empress was slightly inferior, but she had also reached the early stage of the low extreme of the Eternal River tier. Meanwhile, the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was much more inferior, and only reached the late stage of the Sun-Moon tier. Though she had gained the inheritance of 3 Saint Kings, the 3 true Phoenixes were also Saint Kings of the Immortal Realm, and were not versed in the regulations of the Netherworld. Ling Han concluded his period of cultivation, and walked out of the Black Tower. He saw that the cloud-piercing shuttle had already brought them to a completely unfamiliar area of the universe. Nearby, there was a sun that was radiating fiery flames. This was a galaxy. There were signs of life. The cloud-piercing shuttle moved again, and soon landed on a star. There was dense spiritual chi in this place, the kind that was enough to allow saints to appear. Though Empress Wan Xing and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden had both tentatively grasped some regulations of the Netherworld, they both decided to earnestly cultivate inside the Black Tower. No matter what, they still had to catch up in cultivation level. Thus, Ling Han was all alone, and traveled all by himself in this completely unfamiliar world. He curbed his aura, and seemed no different from an ordinary person. However, from the fact that every step he took would let him traverse more than 1,000 miles, one would know that it was absolutely impossible that he was an ordinary person. After traveling for a while, he smelt an aroma wafting over to him. As a true glutton, he was sure that this was coming from someone who was presently roasting meat. Furthermore, the ingredients used were extremely first class. He couldn't help but change direction, and was drawn by the aroma. The source was really not very far off. Otherwise, the aroma could not have possibly wafted into his nostrils. Underneath a huge tree, there was presently a large man who was roasting meat. The large man looked very much like a savage. His upper body was bare, and his lower body only had a short animal hide wrapped around him. His arms and legs were so wide that he was practically like a wild elephant. Placed on the grill were 3 animals that looked very much like chickens. Fat was currently dripping off from them, and the sight of them was already appetizing enough. Ling Han was slightly surprised because this huge man was very strong. He was also in the Eternal River tier. Was it that the overall level of cultivation here was so high that there were many Eternal River tiers, or it just so happened that he met one of the few? Ling Han's appetite was stoked, and he unreservedly asked, "Brother, could you share one with me?" The huge man also discovered Ling Han's presence. He broke into a grin and said, "All right." Ling Han rubbed his hands together, and sat down by the fireside. Upon a closer look, he couldn't help but be even more surprised, because the wood used to start the fire was also not that ordinary. It was definitely divine wood that was above level 10. Usually, it should be used for alchemy as it could supply the powerful flames necessary, but now was actually used to roast meat. If an alchemist saw this, he would definitely scold him for being a spendthrift. Though Ling Han was an alchemist, he was even more certain that he was a qualified glutton. Thus, he did not feel the slightest bit of pity at all. Instead, he was filled with high spirits because if this needed the fire that was supplied from divine wood, would the meat that was being roasted be any ordinary kind of meat? "I am Ling Han," he said. "Goli." The large man turned the stick that was roasting the meat in a well-practiced manner. His expression was focused, which filled Ling Han with a quiet respect. This was a true glutton. They were kindred spirits. In a short while, the roast meat was finally ready. Go Li generously gave a roast chicken, or some kind of bird, to Ling Han, and Ling Han drew out a pot of fine wine. It was brewed from the various fruits grown in the Black Tower, added with some reincarnation tree leaves, and could be considered a precious treasure in itself. Go Li was not reserved, either. He drew out a bowl, and after Ling Han filled it to the brim, he immediately took a generous gulp. He was actually not worried that Ling Han had poisoned the wine. He was honest to the point of being a little foolish. Ling Han, too, ate and drank generously. This meat was really very delicious. It was definitely a divine beast with an extremely high grade. It was filled with divine essence, and was extremely nutritious. This Go Li was really forthright. He actually shared such valuable meat with a stranger without the slightest bit of hesitation. "Insolent thief, you dared to eat our green treasure chicken!" Right at this moment, a young girl charged out, wielding a sword in hand with an icy expression on her pretty face. Ling Han suddenly paused. "Fuck, what forthright man? This Go Li was actually a chicken thief." You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.